Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Housing, Community Safety and Community Engagement Scrutiny Commission. My name is Councillor Sam Foster. I'm the chair of the commission. There are no planned fire alarm tests this evening. If you hear the fire alarm, please leave by the nearest fire exit and make your way to the agreed assembly point, which is at St John's Churchyard off Druid Street. Council security staff will be available to direct you. The public toilets are located off the main reception area. Please switch your mobile phone to silent whilst in the meeting room. Members of the public are welcome to film, audio record, photograph, or tweet the public proceedings of the meeting. I'd ask you to please be considerate towards other people in the room and take care not to disturb the proceedings. If you are filming the meeting, please do not film the audience. A copy of the Council's protocol for reporting and filming is available on the Southwark website. The Council's free internet is called Southwark Free Wi-Fi and does not need a password. This meeting is being live streamed via the Microsoft Teams platform to YouTube and will be uploaded to Southwark Council's YouTube channel by tomorrow. May I remind members to raise your hand if you wish to speak, and please wait until I've given you permission to speak before contributing. And finally, please can I ask members to refrain from digressing onto other issues and keep their comments or questions concise and specific to the agenda item being discussed. A final note as well, there is a new tech setup for these scrutiny meetings, so new cameras and new audio. And it's just a note for members and anyone speaking that it is extra important to use the microphones in order to be picked up by the audio because you won't be heard otherwise. So we're going to move on to the first item of the agenda, which is apologies. I'm not aware of any apologies. Full house this evening, so that's great. We'll move on to confirmation of voting members. So I will be calling out people, asking them to respond or show their hand or respond verbally when their name is called out. So I'm Councillor Sam Foster, I'm the chair. Emily.
I'm Councillor Emily Tester, I'm the vice chair.
Councillor Barry Hargrove, member of the committee.
Councillor Katsia Harper, member of
Councillor Esme Hicks, a member of the committee.
Councillor Salam, member of the committee.
Councillor Jane Salmon, member of the committee.
Bassi, co-opted member.
Chris Cloge.
Tina, chair of Leaseholders Forum and Northwest Area Forum.
Great, thanks for that. Notification of any items of business which the chair deems urgent. There are none, as far as I'm aware. Disclosure of interests and dispensations. Does any member wish to declare any interests or dispensations in respect of any line of business to be considered at the meeting? Councillor Sam.
To declare that I'm a leaseholder in a council property and I'm on district heating as well.
Councillor Hicks.
I'm also a member of a TMO.
Councillor Harper.
I'll repeat that, sorry. So I'm a leaseholder and I'm also a member of a TMO.
And I am also a leaseholder on a council which has a district heater.
Great, thanks very much. Sorry, Bassi, I missed you, sorry.
Also representing the TMOs. Do I need to declare my interest?
I don't think
Okay.
so.
Okay.
It's part of, yeah, I think it's fine. Okay, I'm not seeing any others. So we'll move on to the minutes. Those have been circulated. Are we happy to agree them as a correct record? This is the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of July.
Agreed.
Agreed. So we'll move on to the first main item on the agenda, which is a discussion about the role of TRAs and TMOs in wards. I want to invite our speakers list to come forwards. Here, Nat. Thanks to both of you for joining us this evening. In light of the audio, maybe it's worth kind of nudging your microphones a little closer to yourselves to make sure that the sound is as crisp as possible. If you'd like to introduce yourselves.
My name is Nat Stevens, Resident Involvement Manager. Hakeem Oshinake, Strategic Director of Housing.
Thanks very much to both of you for coming this evening. It would be, I think, helpful if maybe you could give a. Oh, sorry, Chris, did you want to say?
I just wondered whether, given the item, that the number of tenants and residents.
Sure. It's good to see a relatively full house. Certainly, great to see everybody here to hear this. So it would be great, I think, and very helpful for us as it's a relatively broad paper covering a lot of ground, and I think it would be useful before we get into questions if you can maybe speak to it in general terms, outline the key points and that kind of a thing. You're happy to do so.
Chair, thank you. We have about 123 tenants and resident associations in the borough at the moment, from a baseline of 57 in September 2022. So the trajectory is looking very progressive, and we're making significant progress. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Chair, we have about 123 tenants and resident associations covering all wards in the borough. That's from the baseline of 57 TRAs run about September 2022. We currently have about 17 tenant management organizations covering 12 wards in the borough, managing over 4,600 properties in total. Chair, we work with TRAs on the ground. They are a very powerful unit because they help us to be able to empower residents to embed their voice in the way we deliver landlord services. TRAs volunteer at a time, and they carry about 2,300 estate inspections every year, winter, summer, which is quite good. They also do a number of activities that help to develop communities. They're also active partners in helping with the warm hubs to address the cost of living issues. In last winter, we had about 8 TRAs in the borough supporting residents with food and shelter, clothing and food, etc., etc. We also work with TMOs, and there are 17 TMOs in the borough delivering house management services. And the latest satisfaction surveys that we actually did for the regulatory social housing demonstrated the power of TMOs. They came on top in most of the tenant satisfaction measures. That's a summary, Chair.
Thanks very much. Could you perhaps sort of outline where things are at the moment? So starting with TRAs, could you maybe give us a sense of, firstly, it'd be good to get a kind of the nature of this quite large growth in TRAs in the last few years, and what the overall kind of strategy there is for supporting them going forwards. Obviously, it's a key relationship that the council has and a mechanism for the council to engage with residents and for residents to have a say and an impact in what goes on their own estates. But it also puts quite a lot on residents to give up a lot of free time, unremunerated, to engage with the council on aspects of estate management. And so how those are resourced and supported is a really important question, and why we brought it to the committee this evening. So in light of the growth, maybe you can speak to the nature of that, and also what the in a strategic way, how you are looking to support them and where you want to see TRAs going in the next few years.
Thank you, Chair. I am glad to see the significant increase in the number of TRAs being formed in the borough, but we're not stopping there. Our intention is to continue to grow the engagement of residents. I understand your point about residents giving up their time, but as officers of the council, particularly as officers in the landlord services of the council, we want to ensure that all of the decisions we make, all of the steps we take, the policies we ask members to consider and agree, and the procedures we use in delivering the services we deliver are all done with residents rather than to them. So we've got a draft resident engagement strategy at the moment. which we're about to start consultation on. And that engagement strategy is to ensure that we don't just engage via TRAs or via evening meetings only, that we engage residents in whatever way that the residents want to get engaged. And we want to make sure that we're at every junction in almost everything we do, that we can demonstrate that residents are involved in it. The landlord service, it's extremely important for people who are the tenants. And for so long, it's been a paternalistic service, which, where officers determine what's best for residents. And we're gradually moving away from that, where residents' voice determines what we do and how we do it. And that's the general umbrella of what we're intending to do. We fund resident engagement at the moment with £950,000 in totality. I don't know of any other local authority that puts that amount of money in funding resident engagement. And the regulator for social housing just finished an inspection of Southwark, and one of the comments they made was to congratulate us on the number of TRAs we've got and the amount of resources that we put into engaging residents. We're not perfect by any means, and we want to get better. But we want to be able to demonstrate the resident's voice in every decision that we make.
Thanks for that. Just to sort of follow up on that question of resident engagement and the broadening the involvement of residents. So obviously there's a part of resident engagement which does not involve TRAs, of course, and that would never be the sole way that you would involve residents. But equally, there is something to be said for broadening out to engage with the TRAs, whether it's particularly younger members, for example. What is the sort of strategy, or how do you see increasing the involvement of residents in their TRAs, or supporting more kinds of residents to get involved?
Well, we have the Get Involved grant, which any organization that can demonstrate that they are benefiting the activities they are doing account for council tenants. That's really picking up, and we have nearly 43 organizations applying for the Get Involved grant. We have organizations like the Southwark Black Parents Forum. They actually go on estates to help promote people's health and well-being, and they also help to celebrate diversity. You have the Aquatide Festival, for example, that attracts an average of 1,000 residents every summer. It's a very colorful ceremony held at the Camberwell Green. It helps to bring people out, and the proactive engagements that they do, ranging from landlord services to community health, mental health to well-being, it actually encourages a lot of residents to come out and participate. Chair, we have a resident at the back there who has lost, I think, close to 18 or 20 kilograms, as the case may be, as a result of those activities. And this has helped to improve her well-being. And you look at young people, for example, we have the summer activities for young people, organized again by Brandon 3 and other TRAs in the borough, that attracts an average of 200 to 300 young people. And that actually helps them to have activities, meaningful activities to do during the summer. You have the Break the Barrier activities as well by one of the residents there. That helps to encourage young people to bring them together and also learn sellable skills in terms of coding, in terms of taekwondo as well. So we do a broad range of activities. And now we are moving into digitization of the service to make sure digital engagement is at the center of what we do, to actually encourage young people and old people as well to engage with the services digitally.
If I may add, Chair, all of those activities are great in bringing people together, but it creates an opportunity for us to have discussions with them about issues that relate to where they live. So it's one thing, getting people together to have fun and to be a community, but it's also an opportunity for us to engage and have discussions and learn from them some of the things that we're getting right or otherwise.
Thanks. I think that's helpful. I mean, you spoke a lot about the kinds of activities that people can attend and that form of support, and digitization, I suppose, a way of giving people extra ways to do so. I think I wanted to follow up a bit on the more prosaic elements of or just the kind of harder graft of TRAs in terms of like regular meetings, dealing with resident issues, things that come up, problems on the block, and so on. And do you see there as being a bit of a risk that, I guess, to use a sort of corporate term, a kind of key person risk, or problems where a lot ends up being put on individuals who are willing to do a form of unpaid work of estate management, where TRA chairs, usually the chair, who is a sort of go-between between residents and the council, who's connected with officers, for example, and is a sort of main point of contact for a lot of people, and has to do a great deal of work and labour in just in the business of managing meetings, managing emails and calls to get things done around the estate, and kind of work like a colleague with councillors and with housing officers and other members of the council, which is extremely laudable thing for people to give up their time to do, but I think is a challenging structure in a way because of that element of estate management, which is put onto residents who are volunteers, and there being kind of issues arising from that. And I think the question about the involvement of young people is part of that as well. In the same way that young people obviously need good activities and things to do and all that kind of stuff. They're also people who are invested in what their area is like. If it affects them, if they have leaks, and if the bins are not being collected properly, or if there's fly tipping, or all the other manifold issues that arise on estates. So I think that there's that kind of element of estate management that is run through TRAs, if you accept that as a framing of it, where there's an impetus on us to broaden out where that burden falls and provide resources to make sure that it can be done in a better way, if that is indeed what we think is a desirable system at all, which is not necessarily the case. So quite a broad question, but I was wondering if you have thoughts on that element. I suppose to sort of reframe it or narrow it down, it's really about that aspect of resident engagement, which is kind of, I suppose it comes back to the question of empowerment, which we talk about a lot, and being a people-powered Southwark, and that's a phrase that's used in the paper, where empowerment is another way to think of empowerment is about who makes decisions, whether you have the power to make decisions, and it can also just be a lot of work and a lot of effort to have that, not just engaging with people when they're being passive and filling a survey and asking you to kind of go off and do, come back to me and please do enact my wishes, whatever. But when you're engaged in the nitty gritty of getting things done in your area, so there's a strategic question about how we support people to do that. That all makes sense.
I think, first of all, Chair, I have to say I'm so impressed with the passion of residents. They do, in my experience, they voluntarily do this work with passion because they want to see their estates well kept. They also want to make sure that people don't fall into arrears, so they help to support them even to claim universal credit, and they support them with IT support as well. And it came to the fore during the pandemic, Chair, where residents voluntarily took the risk to be able to support us, to collect prescriptions for residents and be able to support them with food. They know their neighbors best, they know their estates best. The passion they have for the warm hubs, for example, some of them voluntarily go to train themselves to get food hygiene certificates so they can cook and feed the poor. There are no better people who understand the needs and aspirations of people who live in the estates more than the residents themselves. And it's that passion and the drive that I can see quite clearly through that is the driver for the things that we are seeing on the estates. In terms of remuneration, I haven't seen residents who have actually come to say, I want to be paid for what they do, because the things they do, we cannot pay them as a council. It's huge. Imagine running a summer camp for nearly 300 young people, having to wake up to prepare breakfast, prepare lunch for them, make sure they are supported, their welfare and their well-being. It takes a huge toll, but never have they come to me to say that I want a single penny. Notwithstanding, they make sure they account for every single penny that's allocated to them. So that's where we are going. But also you have the core grant funding, which we give to TRAs as well. And you also have the Get Involved grant funding, which we give to TRAs as well. They also generate some income from the halls that they rent. We've got about 93 TRA halls, and they generate some income from there. But they put all of that money back into the community, and we can see the improvements they are making. Moving forward, obviously, we provide training and support for the TRA chairs. For the TRAs themselves, we've got 2 community training officers, and we're having a restructure at the moment. And we are going to outsource the training to specialist training providers like TPAT, etc., or whoever may be for the contract, because we want to make sure our residents are fully empowered to make sure they hold us to account in the way landlord services are designed, delivered.
If I could just add to that. So, I mean, all of what Nat said is great, and that's what we do. We don't want to stop people from volunteering. We're a volunteering society, is what we do in this country. But you are right. We under no circumstances must we put on people. Yeah, it's got to be their wish, and we've got to support them in delivering that wish in their own community, in whatever way they want to be supported. And I think, I would want to listen to people to see what sort of remuneration they're looking at. Nat is correct in saying, it cannot become a paid service, but that's not to say that we cannot support them either financially or otherwise. It's an opportunity for people to grow as individuals, and we, as a local authority, as large as we are, we can support that growth in whatever shape that is going to suit them. But we need to understand that. But no matter what, as officers, we have a job. It is our responsibility to ensure that we engage all residents. So we shouldn't be sending volunteers on errands to do the jobs that we should be doing. And that's why we're reorganizing the service, our tenants, residents engagement service, to make sure that we have officers in that team that understand what engagement means in 2024 and going forward. So that they can do it in the right way, and so that they can use that, so that we can obtain information that we can use in delivering our services. So, one, we want to encourage volunteering. We should be supporting those people that do the volunteering, but it shouldn't be a replacement for the jobs that we get paid for.
Thanks. I'm going to open it up to the committee. I see Chris's hand and Councillor. And loads of hands, in fact. So we'll take Chris first.
I just want to make a short piece, but I would like the opportunity to come back. And I'd just like to remind you that this item is actually entitled The Role of Tenants and Residents Associations. Mainly you've spoken about all the work you've done with individuals and all the wonderful work you're doing, not to put too much pressure on people to do all these wonderful things in the community. We actually have a role as tenants and residents association. We have a function to monitor what the council is doing, and you should actually be referring to, you stopped talking to us as tenants and residents associations. I'd just like, you came Hakim came to the SGTO, was interviewed by the SGTO at the last group meeting. One of the questions put to you, Hakim, was that residents stated that Southwark used to have more TNRAs before because of strong engagement since there were area forums. Residents stated that it's sometimes difficult to deal with engagement officers. And your answer was that the number of TRAs that exist is not important to you. That was your actual statement. But this item is all about talking about the importance of tenants and residents. So when saw this item, which I only received 7 days ago.
Chris, I just want to make sure that it comes to a question quickly, because we have a lot of people who want to speak.
Okay, so my question for this is, how can you make that statement that it's not important to you how many TNRAs there are in Southwark, while speaking to this report where it's very clear that TNRAs are extremely important?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for that question, Chris. I can assure you, you have quoted me out of context. May I?
Can I just tell you that it was recorded? We have it on record.
I will clarify, if I may. What I said, and I will repeat it, I am not going to take it back. The number of TRAs we have is not the important issue. The things that we have said prior to that question is what's important. What do we do with the TRAs we have? How do we listen to them? How do we take what they say to us? How does that reflect in the service that we provide? That's the important thing for me. So when I say the number, whether we had 600 or 60, because if we have 600 TRAs and we're not listening to them, it's no good. That's the point I made.
Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nat and Tim. Right. let me first of all be clear on the interest. I've been on TRA in the 90s, SG2, and so on, so I can identify with some of the issues, right? So it's from that viewpoint I'm going to ask my question. And I understand the important role TRA, the role they play in our community, but whether in terms of organizing some of these, after school club or summer scheme and so on. So fantastic, activities. I just want to ask, there are some cynics that we say increasing the number of TMOs.
Sonny, can you drag your microphone towards you?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Still some.
Okay, increasing the number of TMOs and also TRAs is asking them to do more. Is a way of offloading most of council responsibilities volunteers, and if it's TMO, probably poorly paid with not much professional skills in terms of accounting and accountabilities and so on. What will you say to that?
Let me just start by addressing that question by saying, I started my career some 32 years ago working for a TMO. And the people who were on the committee were highly qualified academics and chartered accountants. So to say they don't have the skills, I think you only need to check the profile of some of the TMO chairs and treasurers that we have to see that they've got the requisite skills and experience to be able to deliver those services. Some of them do it, a lot of them, but all of them that I've come across, they do it for the passion to be able to make meaningful changes on their estates. And the efficiency savings that we generated, for example, running TMOs, those are used to actually bring forth new kitchens, new bathrooms, so there's all tangible benefits. And being a local service on the estate, it's accessible because you get to know people by their name, where they live, and their issues. So it's of huge benefit to the community. In terms of TRAs, the monumental work they do, particularly if you go to Akon TRA, for example, they help the young people come together to be able to pay back the cost for all whatever wrongs they may have done. They cook and they deliver food, and it also helps the mentoring facility that they're able to get other young people out of trouble as well. And we've got one of the chair of Akon TRA here who can speak to that. And I've been to so many other TRAs across the borough, and it is the same message. You go to Kingswood, for example, the work they are doing there to change things around, the work they are doing there to break the barrier to change the lives of the community members as well, it's immense. The loneliness they address in terms of Christmas and the cost of living is huge. None of them have come to me to say, I want a penny for what I am doing. In fact, the scrupulous accounting papers they send to me when they do the gig applications, they even account for how many forks and plates they buy. That's how scrupulous they have been. The commitment of volunteering is admirable. Not even an MBE can reward them for the service they do. All we can say is thank you.
So, Chair, if just one more question to follow up. Coming back to Chris's earlier question, I know Hakim already said he tried to report that I didn't say exactly what has been credited to him in relation to the importance or non-importance of the TRAs. So if it's important and we understand the importance of the great role our TRAs are playing now, community, which I've mentioned, which have been part of it. Why are we not considering strengthening them and giving them more resources? Why are we then creating competition between TRA and TMO? Because that's why I get and want to just reassure me that's not the case.
Believe me, I've worked in 3 local authorities. I've never seen a local authority like Southwark, which is more resourced in terms of the funding that we give to TRAs. I think we are one of the best resourced local authorities broadly in the entire country. And secondly, TRAs help us to define the service, how good or how poor it is. They set the service standards, they monitor the service, and they review it. You take estate inspections, for example, Chair. There are about 2,300 estate inspections carried out by TRAs globally, annually, every year.
You're not answering my question because the number I'm more interested in, because that's what is raised before.
Yes.
I'm talking about the number. Why are we not investing, increasing the number rather than the allegation made that the number is not important, even though I know Hakim said he didn't actually say it that way. But I want to know why we're not increasing the number.
Chair, just to come back, in September 2022, we had about 57 TRAs. Today, September 2024, we have 123 TRAs, more than 100%. So the trajectory is looking upwards, and we are encouraging more TRAs to come on board. And we are restructuring our service to make sure we bring specialist trainers on board to be able to encourage more people to take up TRAs as well. Southwark has one of the largest TMOs in the entire country. We have 17 TMOs. We outpace other local authorities by a mile. So when it comes to TRAs and TMOs, we are not only an outlier, we are an exemplar to other people. And the awards that we have won as a council, hard work of those people behind us here is immense.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate. So I've got Councillor Harper and then Councillor Tester, and I've seen your hands as well directed. And everybody is on the list in some order. And I understand we obviously we will want to touch on and address the TMOs aspects as well. Just to say, I'm aware this is a very broad kind of topic. We can't possibly cover everything that we're going to want to cover. And when we get to the work program at the end of this meeting, there may be things we want to pick up on in a future meeting. So just to say, Councillor Harper.
Thank you, and thank you for presenting. Can everybody hear me at the back? Okay, great. I'll lead in. So I really appreciate you kind of talking through the different ways you're engaging with community members through things like Black Parents Forum and then kind of the gig grants. And I guess I was kind of two parts to this question. One is like how much of those kind of events and community engagement sessions signposting people to the TRAs. And I say that because I think there is even though there are multiple ways for residents to engage, I do think the TRAs, in my experience from my ward, have a lot more kind of direct access to council and decision makers. And it's kind of a good way to kind of keep the conversation going. So I guess despite all the other engagement things we're doing, I do think there is a benefit in people being members of the TRAs specifically. And then that kind of other point about bringing more people in, I think we've all been to TRAs, which are kind of 10 people coming in representing 1,000 households. And the kind of the remuneration point you've been talking about and training and development, I think is a really important thing that TRAs can do, particularly with young people. Because that's if you're still kind of working out what you want to do as a job, it is a really good opportunity to have training. So I'm wondering if there's a way we can kind of increase our capacity and training and development team. Maybe those people are at some of those community events, kind of talking to young people and encouraging them to come, maybe going to TRAs with kind of not just young people, but anybody who's interested in that, rather than doing the training separately. And then kind of coming back to the TRA, being a bit more of a mentoring, coaching presence. And if that's something kind of the team would kind of consider. Thank you. Sorry, that was quite long.
Thank you very much for that question. Very interesting question. Well, I'd just like to illustrate it with one point. We have a gentleman here, a young person, I suspect between the ages of 20 to 26, as the case may be, who is now the chief executive of the Southwark Black Parents Forum, and he lives on council estate, on Olin Estate. And it's the average age of those who are leading the Southwark Black Parents Forum, in my estimation, is about 23. So it tells you about the power that we're trying to train young people to put power in their hands to take leadership roles in these communities. And the activities that are done, they are done in TRA halls right across the borough as well. And that is helping to galvanize support and to attract other people as well onto the TRAs as well. But obviously, we now need to look at digital technology, which is one of the few things that young people tend to be engaged with more. That is now part of the restructure that we are doing to make sure digital engagement and the way we relate to young people, we are able to lever in the power of technology to make sure they are fully engaged as well. So it is work in progress. We are in the process of delivering 80 laptops, about 80 TRAs as our commitment in terms of, regardless of budget constraints, to make sure every TRA would have a laptop so people can come and access those facilities and be able to do some job applications, CVs, access benefits, and be supported as well. So we're doing all that we can to make sure we attract the right demographics, all the demographics, to make sure there's diversity in the way TRAs are run and governed.
I have two questions, but I can do one and then. You? Go for it. Okay, fine. That's fine. No. So the first question is probably hopefully easy enough to answer, and it's the two. Yeah, it's fine. Sorry, I've got a bit of a sore throat. But the two spreadsheets that you've sort of sent us over as appendices, what are the processes for making sure that these are kind of accurate and like kept up to date? And what actually is the sort of purpose for those? Is this the database of all the TRAs and TMOs? Because actually there's an awful lot of inaccuracies on them, and there's two TRAs that are meant to be in my ward that are attributed to being South Bermondsey. There's one that is meant to be in South Bermondsey, which is in North Bermondsey, and there's just a whole lot of information that is missing off of these. So I'd quite like to understand. And similarly for the TMO one, the Two Towers TMO falls across both London Bridge, West Bermondsey and North Bermondsey. And I think it's really important to make sure that we're actually showing accurate information about both of these things. The other one as well is obviously you kind of claimed that the number of TRAs that we have is increasing, but from a little bit of quick maths on the spreadsheet that you said, it seems that we've actually had a decrease in the number of TRAs from 23-24 to 24-25. And it's roughly about 21. So what's happening to revive some of those that have now become defunct? How are we kind of looking to reinvigorate those? And also who takes ownership and management of the community spaces that are kind of owned by those TRAs whilst they are defunct as well? Because I can think of two in my ward that have rooms on estates that no one knows how to access now that the TRAs have gone under. So there's an awful lot of questions there, but I think just a few things to clear up really.
Yeah, you're right. The database, some work needs to be done on it to make sure it's more reflective, but it's a live document and it's being updated quite regularly, and we'll take that back on board and make sure we continue to update it. But in terms of the number of TRAs, yes, you're right. Before COVID, we had about 143 TRAs before COVID. But obviously, as a result of COVID, we had lots of difficulties. And starting back in 2022, there are huge challenges. But we're going through all those challenges, and obviously people pass away, and the average age of those who are on those TRAs is about 77, 80, 89, and things happen. So once that generation is gone, it's been kind of difficult on some of those estates to try and attract older people to come onto them. But we are doing proactive visits. We're actually visiting homes now and talking to people on those estates. And today we've done about 711 visits to those estates to try and talk to people about the benefits of TRAs. And this is how we have been able to improve the numbers from where we were in the baseline position of 57 in 2022 to 123 as of today. So it is increasing.
Sorry, just the last bit of the question as well about for those that are defunct, what happens to the spaces that those groups maintain?
Well, again, it is their TRA hall. So we're having conversations with them in terms of allowing other organizations to come onto the estate, because we cannot do anything to them without their input. It is their TRA hall. If they want a partner organization to come and work with them to be able to run activities on the estate, we're encouraging them to do so. We have a number of organizations who are approaching us, but instead of us putting pressure on the TRAs or the residents of the estate to embrace those organizations, we partner with them, we talk to them about the benefits of sharing the bills, etc. So we are working with them. But some estates are clearly not quite interested in having partner organizations coming onto their estates. They want to do all the things they can to revive the TRAs, and we are doing that to try and support them.
Yeah. Can we take away and look at how residents on an estate can use what was a TRA hall without a TRA? Thank you.
I've got Councillor Hicks next. I'm not confident of the audio of this, but everyone will be captured eventually. So, Councillor.
Thank you. I was going to ask a similar question actually about halls, because they are a really key community asset. So that's reassuring that it's reassuring that that's going to be something that you take away and think about. I'm also thoughtful about even where there are TRAs active and in place. It's an awful lot of work quite often to be managing hall bookings and generating that income for the TRA to then reinvest in their community. So has any thought been put into how the council might better support just in terms of the day-to-day administration of that, appreciating that it's clearly for tenants and residents to manage as they see fit, but just in terms of some of the, I guess, some of the paperwork or some of the day-to-day admin piece, I think that would be just interesting. And then my other question was just around TMOs. Actually, similar question to Councillor Tester in terms of TRA numbers. So I noticed that Fair Community Housing Services obviously handing back management of their estate to the council. Are we looking at that and taking learnings away in terms of, you know, why is that happening? Are we adequately supporting TMOs? How do we make sure that the TMOs that are remaining are able to succeed in the way that they manage their community, their homes?
Thank you very much. Very good question. In terms of the management, day-to-day management of the TRA halls, we are in constant communication with the TRAs themselves, and obviously we support them. But I can assure you, some of them are more speciality in what they do than we do ourselves. If you go to estates like, say, Brandon 1 or Brandon 3, Brandon 1, for example, they manage a huge Jacobs Hall. They are doing it better than we have done ourselves as a council for the last 20 years, I can assure you. So we have a lot of learning from them as well. You go to Pellier TRA, they are doing a much better job than we could actually do ourselves. Pellier, for example, they have got bright features. It's an after-school club. They organize for themselves and to make sure kids who come after school have a place to eat to start with, and they have supervision to do maths, English, and science, etc. So they are doing a much better job than ourselves. So we have, on the reverse, we have to learn a lot from them, I have to say. But coming to TMOs, I am very passionate with TMOs because I started my career some 32 years ago working for a TMO. And to see a TMO go down is one of the greatest heartaches I've had to see since I've picked up this job in the last 2 years. We have to put our hands up to say, in fact, we as a council, we have not been doing what we ought to do to support those TMOs. We have not been doing the monitoring that we are meant to do. There has not been proper financial governance and scrutiny to make sure money given to those TMOs are used for the purpose intended. So there are huge lessons to learn from that. As a consequence of that, we are in the middle of carrying out a restructure of the TMO management service and to be quite proactive and make sure we are interventionist and supportive and make sure we are ensuring that the TMOs actually deliver what's in their contractual agreements and their support and training available throughout. And there are checks and balances to make sure they don't deviate from that.
Councillor Salmon. I caught you on Vice President.
Thank you, Chair. Just to lighten for a moment, many years ago when I moved into my flat, I was asked if I'd like to join the TA. I genuinely thought it was the Territorial Army. And it's the path of that has led to me being here today. But I'm one of the resurrected TNRAs, the Congreve and Barlow. So I'm absolutely delighted that there are some new ones coming on board. My question was a little bit more going with my colleagues here. There are too many red blocks on your big spreadsheet, and they're in worrying places. For me, people were getting grants for the coronation and grants for Christmas, but their books hadn't been audited and you didn't know anything about their bank accounts. And that is a bit of a worry to me. I couldn't see the amounts. I don't know how much they get. Is that something we can see? How much they got for their Christmas grant and their, you know, the gig money? I didn't see how much that involved, what sort of sums it involved.
Yeah.
It worries me that there aren't the checks and balances to the bank accounts. And I can see that it's very difficult for them to open bank accounts for business sakes, but it's also, it would be troubling if money isn't going in exactly the right places. But you, I'm sure, have checks and balances for these things, but there are just too many red blocks in there. where you don't know anything about their bank account, and AGMs. There's blocks where you don't know where the AGMs are happening or how they're happening. And that goes to who is being elected to run this TNRA and how they are. I think I was going to ask about Fair Street as well. And I was going to go on a little bit more of a serious note as well about now that we've got the report from Grenfell and we know the local authority, and I declare an interest here, I did work for Kensington and Chelsea, let the TMO do what they liked, and the disaster and the horrific consequences of that. Are we going to up the way we engage with TMOs when they're doing major works, if they're doing major works, or do we do the major works and they don't have to be involved? But I think Grenfell has shown that the two have to be together. So those are my questions. Thank you.
If I answer the Grenfell question and Nat will do the rest as his area of expertise. I dare not interfere. Thank you for asking the question about Grenfell. It's a key issue at the moment, but it's been a key issue for me since I started here before that report came out. And as Nat said earlier, it is clear that we haven't been monitoring our TMOs properly as we should. Nowhere near, what we should have been doing. Which is why, because what we did was saw TMO like TRAs as an engagement feature, but TMOs are a management organization, and with a contract, with a managing agent contract with the council, and our relationship with them. Yes, we should engage with them, but it's a landlord engagement, rather than a resident engagement, which is why we're splitting the engagement team into TMO management and resident engagement. And that is why that monitoring has taken off, which is why the revelations we're seeing about the defaults in the accounts of the TMOs are being exposed. So we're dealing with all of that, and there is nothing in the Grenfell report that we're not already doing. I want to give you that assurance.
Hakim has already addressed the Grenfell issue. In terms of concrete Ebalo, thank you very much. A lot of work has gone into that, and we're happy to see that things are moving in the right direction. In terms of the AGMs, yes, we now have a governance calendar, and officers are required to complete the governance calendars to make sure they are attending those AGMs. And as I said, we are in the middle of a restructure, and we're going to be focusing. There'll be a particular team just focusing on written engagement, another team just focusing on TMO governance. So there'll be much more transparency, much more accountability structure to make sure officers are on the ground. As we speak, there's a tier and AGM at Denmark today. We are not tracking to make sure officers are there and conducting those AGMs, and we are also leaning on SGTO as well to support us with those AGMs as well. So a lot of work, a lot of thought and care is going into this.
And the question about the grants that are handed out and how much it comes to, because I think residents should know how much their TNRA is being given.
Yeah, it's a public resource. We made that available to the Northwest Area Housing Forum. We'll make it available to everybody, so you see what each person, which organization is getting as a give grant, and obviously the returns. We need to make sure we monitor them, and we're actually getting feedback from those activities as well, and to make sure monies are used appropriately for what is intended. And if we have monies are not used, they are clawed back. There will be some returns as well. And we are also making sure there's due diligence in terms of monies being paid to correct bank accounts. And that's happening at the moment as we speak. So I'm not saying it's perfect, by no means, but it's open, it's transparent. If the Commission wants the list, we're happy to make the list available from last year, from this year. It tells you the name, reference number for the grant, who the grant is going to, and the amount as well. So it's quite open because they're all public resources.
Can we make a note of that? Great. I've got Councillor Hargo next, and then I will come.
Yeah, thank you. Mine's on a similar theme to Councillor Salmon's. My question is regarding some of the funding. Oh, okay. We had a better. I thought we had a brand new system. It works very well. It has its limitations. Okay, fine. My question is along the lines of what Councillor Salmon just asked. It's around funding, and that the resident participation fund is 900k in total, roughly, and TRAs have a core funding budget of 178k per annum. So first question regarding this is, what is that 178 per annum? Does that cover?
A good question. The £170,000 funds existing tenants and resident associations, and it also helps support estates that want to form a tenants and resident association. It also supports them with community training and administration as well. And there's a set formula for how much you get depending on the number of properties that you actually manage. And for the last 3 years, that particular fund has been underspent. So there's enough resource where I'm sitting to make sure we get more and more TRAs.
Is it automatically allocated, or does TNRAs or local areas have to bid for that 178,000?
Yeah. At the moment, if you have over £15,000 in your account, we would not be giving you that money, because we want to encourage you to spend the money on activities to encourage people. So if you have like £30,000, we want you to do £15,000 worth of activities on your estate before you can come back to us for additional funding. So it's an incentive for you to invest the money in community activities and bring more people onto the TRA. So there are checks and balances there.
And then, so what is the remaining £822,000 spent on?
Yeah, broadly, we have the SGTO grant, which is there to give advice and support to tenants and to form TRAs, etc. That's worth about £230,000. We also have the Homeowners Advice Service by the Citizen Advice Bureau, and that's worth about £63,000 or £64,000 as well. And also you have the gig funding as well, the Get Involved Grant gig funding. That's running into the region of nearly £250,000. And also you have staff salaries as well, and those who support the services and the training officers as well. And that runs about £100,000 as well for training. So all of that in total comes about a little under £900,000.
Can I just come back on?
Yeah, I think for meeting efficiency, it'd be good if you asked all your questions and then
Yeah, it's triggered another
all right.
idea. So I think every micro area should have a TNRA, every micro area, because the ones that have them, I think, benefit more. It benefits the local estate or the local area of housing. Everyone should have them, and I think everyone should have a TNRA.
Is that? Do you want to comment on that?
Thank you. It's an aspiration. We'll work as best as we can to improve the number.
Okay, Bassi, and then we'll take it.
Thank you, Nat, for the presentation. I know why you were. Can everybody hear me? Well, okay. I know why you were making a statement about TMOs. I noticed that some of the things that you said about TMOs are quite different from what is on the document. So I'm kind of worried about that, because there are some things that wonderful things that TMOs are doing. But looking at this document is just like a bad report about TMOs activities in Southwark. So I think it would have been helpful if we shared some of the good things that the TMOs are doing. For example, we are consistently outperforming the council in most of the KPIs. So, so I wouldn't want that to be forgotten about. There might be issues, but it's also good for us to do a balanced representation of the TMOs in terms of what they are doing. So that's one comment. My question, the first question is, you said something about, we're talking about TRAs. There are some TRAs that are not functioning. And also, we haven't had a new TMO development for some years now. So my first question is, in terms of TRAs, you said you are working with the TRAs to revamp them or restart them. What specific support are you giving to the TRAs in order to help them? And also, what specific support do you give to areas that want to have a TMO within in their patch? So that's the first question. The second question, you said something about resident engagement participation documents that you are drafting. What input did the residents have in the drafting of that document? Or is it the council that just put together a document and say, okay, we are going to consult you on this document? Were there any residents that were part of that process of producing that document so that they will kind of add things from their own perspective into that document? And then my other question is around, in paragraph 10, you said the new TMO contract monitoring toolkit. Were TMOs consulted in drafting that new toolkit, monitoring toolkit, so that they can also feed in how their own experience or how help inform how that monitoring process can work effectively going forward? I think those are my questions for now.
Again, Chair, very good questions, but I'll go through them very quickly, beginning with the contract monitoring checklist. That's a recommendation from the BDO reports from the TMOs that they visited, and they recommended that we work with the contract monitoring checklist. And that checklist is being scrutinized, and the next stage is for it to come to stomach, so you are aware of it, and then for us to engage with the officers as well, TMO officers, to make sure it's a document that we can all own and share, and make sure the governance of TMOs is correct, and no TMO has to close that FCHS because of poor governance. Going back to the resident engagement strategy, Chair, we spoke to actually visited people in their homes. We spoke about 511 residents at the time on 46 council estates, and they shared experience from a diverse background. So if you look at the paper that we sent to you, to actually show you the demographic profile of those we spoke to, it ranges from age 16, 17 to 84, from Black, white, all racial groups. And they tell us regularly their priorities, that they want to be empowered, and they want to make sure they hold the council accountable for repairs, for cleaning, for grants maintenance, and they want things for the kids to do, and they don't want the libraries to close. So all sorts of things they've told us, and all of that is now in the document to come through the local housing forum, tenants forum, and then after homeowners forum, and then it goes to the wider public. It's a working document. It's been road tested by our compatriots in other local authorities and TPAS, and they've all said this is really a fantastic, it's a good blueprint of how we want a strategy to work. In terms of TRAs that are not functioning, again, there are some TRAs that are not functioning, and as I say, the baseline was 57 in 2022 September. So today it's 123. I think we've made significant progress as merited by other people. So we want to make sure we continue to work with them. For specifically TMOs, we're now going through a restructure. And the new job description says you should be a TMO development and monitoring officer. So not only a monitoring officer, you have a responsibility to develop a TMO. And with TRAs increasing from 57 to 153, that's a natural progression by states from the TRA to become a TMO. So there's huge scope and a lot of thought and care is going into that process. In terms of saying that TMOs do good things, I think, Chair, I mentioned quite clearly that the tenant satisfaction measures required by the regulator of social housing, that TMOs outperform the council in many areas. But I do apologize for leaving that out, but I did acknowledge that. I mean, I was a product of TMO myself, and consistently TMOs outperform us. The proximity that they have to the residents and the access the residents have to the services, and because local residents hold the TMO accountable for those services, there is a tendency that they are outperforming us. And we thank you enormously for the sacrifice that you do voluntarily. You don't get paid as TMO chair and as a TMO chair as well.
Hi, thank you. We hear a lot about SADC opinion about themselves. And on the point 9 in this report is written about the significant weaknesses in the council governance over checking the TMOs. What is missing is that there are 42 pages, which is an extensive report, and we're talking about millions. This is a word which is behind significant, and also have serious impact on the asset management. The two questions I'm going to ask, they are on behalf of the Bermondsey Street TRA. This session should have brought evidence from the TRAs because they might have a different opinion of what the officers will say. So one of the TMOs mentioned in the auditor's report, it is the leather market JMB. For the past 3 years, it has been a conflict and there has been disagreement between the leather market TMO, which decided to obstruct the involvement of both the TRA, the Bermondsey Street TRAs, but also a section that tenants and leaseholders who are inconvenient. So the first question is, when SADC would resolve the dispute, because it's 3 years now? And the second, the following question on the first point is, with SADC being part of the mediation, given the extensive failures of monitoring. The second question is, the JMB start to create a secondary TRA on the same estate, and to dismantle the inconvenient TRA, which doesn't fit in their view, in their requirements. So the second part of the question is, would SADC support the existing TRA, which is Bermondsey Street, to continue to operate and not to be dismantled by creating a secondary TRA on the same area, and where the Bermondsey Street could have their meetings in an independent TRA hall? Thank you.
Very good question, Ina, and thank you very much for that question. Chair, we are aware of the issues at the JMB. We have issued legal advice to all TMOs in the borough to say the law prohibits TMOs from restricting non-resident leaseholders from having access to the governance structure of TMOs and from buying shares. We told them that's quite unlawful. They now have up to their AGMs to be able to make sure their constitutions are compliant with the regulations, the right to manage regulations. It's very important that they do so. And we have been to Stomach, and the chair of Stomach is here. We also made that very clear to them. That's quite important. But we also have to understand that our powers as a local authority is quite restricted. It's in the management agreement. We have to pursue mediation as a public authority. Everything we do, we have to make sure it is reasonable and proportionate. We cannot take a sledgehammer to crack a peanut. So we are working with the GMB constructively. They have also taken their own independent advice, which they're entitled to, and they say their position is correct and our position is wrong. We disagree with them fundamentally, but we are pursuing mediation. That mediation is being done through CAM mediation, and we have already attended a few mediation sessions. The Director of Landlord Services has been in mediation. So we are having ongoing conversations, because if we go to litigation, we've got to demonstrate that we have not just rushed to litigation, that we've explored all options to make sure the GMB comes on board and understands the council's position, and we are able to resolve the issues amicably. But if we fail to do so, Chair, the management agreement also mandates us to go to adjudication as well. And we will subscribe to adjudication, and the ruling will be binding on all of us. So there are procedures in place. Also, the GMB's management agreement is out of time, it's expired, and we are now engaged in constructive dialogue to try and renegotiate the MMA. And those issues Ina has highlighted will be part of that renegotiation arrangement as well, before we are able to enter into another contract with them. So it's ongoing.
Chair, my questions have not been answered. I said tenants as well. So the JMB rejected the director or the appointee of the Bermondsey Street TRA on the board and the JMB, and it was a tenant. So the obstruction is both leaseholders and tenants. So you have not answered the question. The question was when, because we are talking about 3 years now, and also if Southwark is going to be part of the mediation because of the failures of control for the last 3 years. And the second part of the question was that the Bermondsey Street would like to have their TRAs, and they want to be guaranteed their right of existence and not allow JMB to dismantle them and to create a secondary TRA on the same area. Those are my questions. None of them that have been answered.
Chair, as I said, we are in constructive dialogue with the GMB, and the issues Ina has highlighted are on the table. Obstruction of tenants from becoming members of the GMB, that's also on the agenda for discussion as well. We have told them that the constitutions that they have in place, which excludes a certain number of people from accessing the governance structures of the GMB, are wrong. They are at odds with the regulations. They have taken advice, and I'm just repeating myself to say they are right, and we are still in dialogue with them. And if the dialogue does not succeed, then obviously we'll have to move on to arbitration, and that's what we are with that. In terms of the obstruction of the Bermondsey Street TRA, it's still part of the Constitution, because what they are saying is that they are non-resident leaseholders there, and we are saying to them, no. The law is very clear. It says leaseholders are entitled to buy a share certificate, and they are also entitled to be part of the governance structures. So excluding them is at odds with the management agreement, but with the letter and the spirit of the law. So I've answered the question quite clearly. We've made it very clear to them that what they are doing is wrong. In terms of time frame, we are in negotiations, and we are party to the mediation as well. I've just said we have attended mediation sessions with the JMB and Bermondsey Street, so we are a party to the mediation. But the mediation effort fails, and we have exhausted all peaceful avenues of reaching an amicable solution. Then the only option we have now is to invoke arbitration, which is allowed for within the MMA.
All right, thanks. I think we can't get too far deeply into a single case. I know that it's something that has been raised a lot, and it's a very sensitive topic. As I said, it might be that when we come to discussing the work program of the meeting, there are things we want to look at further. And in terms of individual issues, I'm very happy to set up meetings or to speak to residents or representatives of bodies involved to discuss how we can involve it future in scrutiny. I think we'll probably have to leave it there for now in the interest of time, as we've already run quite long on this item. I know that Councillor Hicks wanted to come back, and then Chris quite quickly perhaps, and then we might have to wrap up and move on. Yeah.
Thank you. So just I guess a question around rather dry topic of policies. So TMOs, as I understand it from my experience in TMO, are required to have policies that dictate the way that they manage the organisation and how they run services on behalf of the council for residents. Do we have anything that we support TRAs with in terms of pro formas for policies? And I'm particularly thinking back to the finances question earlier, which are maybe financial procedures and policies that TRAs can use to adapt to work for them, but that gives them some good practice, best practice for sort of managing finances. That's a sort of fairly micro question. And then my other point, and maybe it's for the chair and the rest of the committee, could the draft resident engagement strategy be brought back to this?
In terms of policies for TRAs, yes, we have 2 training officers, and it is their job and to make sure the TRAs are fully aware of the financial obligations, how to do accounting. So there's a suite of training and other policies which underpins the way TRAs work. And also SGTO have been very helpful. They help to audit or provide a financial statement for those TRAs as well, because when we give them big grants, they've got to show a statement how those monies are spent, and SGTO are doing a good job in my own view. In terms of the pro forma, yes, there's a step-by-step guide which the training officers give to them. And resident involvement strategy, the draft one, yes, we're more than happy to come back to scrutiny once scrutiny is ready.
Thanks very much, Chris. If you want to quite quickly, and then we'll.
I'm not sure what this has actually achieved, what this meeting actually achieved, and I do hope we come back. This is supposed to be scrutiny. There's a report here about tenants and residents association that I was sent 7 days ago, which TNRAs have never had sight of, so I didn't know what was actually being said. We sent it out to the SGTO, and the SGTO sent it out to as many tenants and residents associations on their membership list. There are so many deficiencies in this report, which is why we've got so many tenants here who at the moment's notice have come along. But this meeting hasn't achieved anything in terms of way forward. It says here the extensive network of 120 TNRAs are actually involved in holding local landlord services to account. How are they doing that? You've destroyed the structures that allow us to do that and put in its place forums. I was at a recent forum where, despite all the best intentions of the chair of that forum, there were 4 tenants and 2 leaseholders, both coming from the same household, and a number of really top high professionals. I'd love to know how much that meeting cost. The 6 of us that were there as individuals. We didn't represent our tenants associations. And so this idea that we're actively holding local landlord services to account is a nonsense, because that isn't happening. Never received reports. There's nothing ever for us to discuss on tenants associations, take back to the council. Could I just ask, is this the document what document is this?
I don't think that is the document.
That's not the resident engagement document.
No, that's a different thing.
This is another document that everyone's been consulted except for tenants and residents associations. And I only had sight of this because one tenant was shown it at a totally different meeting. Tenants and residents associations and the SGTO haven't seen this document. So all this good, wonderful work you're doing, liaising with people and giving us information is just not happening. And the questions that the 2 councillors asked about the 123 TRAs, I just think that's really wishful thinking. And I noticed one TRA in particular who's on there, because I'm very familiar with it, that's seen as an active tenants and residents association, that is working so hard to bring itself back from COVID. It's as active as it can be, but it should never be on this dream list. There's all these TNRAs that are doing all this magnificent work. There are plenty of them, and I think all the people represented here are doing brilliant work as tenants and residents associations. But this is a dream. This is a dream list. I just think we've got to come back a second time with more honesty to actually get the views of tenants and residents associations, for them to actually see documents, to hear what you're actually saying is happening when we know full well it isn't. And, you know, I sound angry, but I'm just so dismayed. There's many people in this room that have given years and years and years of their lives, never asking for remuneration. And I don't know, I think you've mentioned remuneration 3 times. We have never asked for it. I don't even know why you've raised it.
I think it was because I mentioned it.
Well, but it shouldn't be raised. That's not what we're here for, ever, and never have been. So I think this is quite a dishonest document. I would ask that we come back to it and we do it in conjunction. Let some of the Tenants and Residents Association representatives sit at that top table and tell it like it is.
So perhaps more of a point for me than for yourselves, but I don't know if either of you want to comment on.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris. I want to comment on the holding us to account. At the moment, the structures we have do not do justice to holding us to account at all. You know, that's a commitment that I want to make to this committee. That's a commitment that I want to make to all residents. You know, part of reorganizing the resident engagement service is to create opportunities for residents to hold us to account, because that is not happening enough as it should at the moment, not at all.
All right. Well, thank you both for coming, speaking to us. I think you can return now to the audience or go about your business. And just before we move on to the next item, obviously we do have a discussion about the work programme at the end, but there's been several suggestions that we bring this back, including from Councillor Hicks as well, talking about the draft resident engagement strategy. My view is that it's certainly quite a fair point to make that we've had a item talking about the future and strategy of TRAs, but without representatives from the TRAs themselves. So I'd be very happy to bring this back to a meeting and find a kind of a structure to talk about that and basically make this the first of 2 parts on this topic before we sort of come to recommendations. I would note as well that last year, the previous committee, we had did 2 meetings on a row on the same topic about heating outages, and I think having revisited it shortly after the first time was quite productive and helped result in a better meeting. So I think it would be quite valuable to do that. And I appreciate your frustration, because I don't agree that it wasn't worth us doing this. I think that it will be a very helpful thing to inform the future meeting, particularly as you say, we have many representatives tonight from TRAs, and they will have had opportunities to hear from Southwark leadership on this issue, and I'm sure that will help in comes next as well. I'm sorry, but we won't take points from the floor, but as I said earlier, you can absolutely welcome to contact me and we can have a discussion outside the meeting, and there will be, we can talk about how we bring it back to scrutiny at a future date. Is there anything else, or should we? Okay, so we will now move on to the next item on the agenda. This is an item about the excessive gas consumption in district heating networks across Southwark, but particularly on the North Peckham estate. And I see our patient officers have come to speak to this. So thanks for waiting for this item to come up. A double header for Hakeem. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves, that would be great. Tom, if you want to go.
Yeah, I'm Tom Vosper, Strategic Project Manager for Heat Networks.
Simon Holmes, Head of Engineering and Compliance.
Great, and of course we still have Hakeem here as well. Thank you for the paper on this issue. I suppose it's worth saying a bit about the context for this, that this arises as a result of some campaigning and lobbying and sort of investigative work that's been done by a group of leaseholders on the North Peckham estate who had identified that gas usage on the estate was above the norm for what would be expected of on a per household basis, essentially. And one of the representatives of that group came and spoke to the last council assembly, as members of the committee might recall. And I know that some work has been done since then with the cabinet member. Officers have been investigating, and there's been a lot of ongoing dialogue with that group in particular. And I think what would be useful at this meeting is to discuss, of course, those issues that arose from that and the causes. And I think Scrutiny can have a really valuable piece of input here into looking into the sort of structural questions about what needs to be addressed as a result of these problems, the nature of the problems and how they impact on the network kind of as a whole. So I don't know if you wish to perhaps, Tom, I don't know if you want to speak quickly to the paper and introduce it or not. Up to you.
Yep, very happy to. Thank you, Chair. So as you rightly pointed out, the topic has been raised, especially by residents on the North Peckham and Gloucester Grove estates.
I think we might need to. Sorry, it's a recurring thing of the volume.
The residents on the North Peckham and Gloucester Grove estate have done a lot of work themselves, digging into the gas consumption and the efficiency of their heat network. So just want to put on record that we're grateful to them for the work that they've put in. The paper that we've presented deals with the North Peckham heat network and also the wider set of heat networks around the borough, of which there are around 100. We present in paragraph 5 that the average...
Excuse me, I don't think you should be sitting quite there. I think maybe behind them is okay, but it sort of looks like you're joining them. Okay, I mean, you can draw your chairs up a little bit, but I think side on is probably a bit too close to being sitting with them, you know. Is everyone comfortable with this readjustment of audience? Okay, great. All right, sorry, Tom, please carry on.
So we've in the paper covered not just the North Peckham and Gloucester Grove estates and the North Peckham district heating system, but the wider set of heat networks that we have around the borough, which is around 100 boiler houses. In paragraph 5, we identify that the average gas use per property is around 19,000, and how that compares to off-gem figures of around 11,500. And then we go through reasons why in some of the heat networks that is the case, simply because there is losses in the boiler house, losses in the heat network, and often due to the fact that they're older heat networks which don't have heat meters, the heat consumption within the dwellings can be higher as well. That given, we answer the question about are heat networks actually efficient? Sometimes people state that heat networks are more efficient than individual heating systems, and in a purely technical energy efficiency sense, that's not really the case. The efficiency point that people, I think, are trying to make is that they can be more cost efficient through the use of bulk purchasing, the use of centralized maintenance and management of systems, and they're easier to decarbonize by utilizing waste heat sources such as cell chip, or being able to plug in heat pumps to district heating systems. So there's lots of benefits to heat networks, but from a purely energy efficiency percentage terms, they're not more energy efficient than an individual boiler. An individual boiler doesn't have any heat loss within that system because it's generating heat within the property. And we recognise that maybe that's in the way it presents and communicates the benefits of heat networks. We then dig into the specific issues at North Peckham, and there are some technical reasons why the gas consumption there is higher. Again, mainly because it's a higher temperature heat network and what we call a 4-pipe heat network. So there's just more pipe, and added to that, there's the Tuke School, which is taking heat from the heat network at the North Peckham estate, and the fact that the boiler house is not actually on the estate for historical reasons. Parts of the older 1960s estate were decommissioned and demolished and rebuilt and never reconnected to the heat network. So there's the additional pipe to get heat from the boiler house to the estate before it starts serving the properties. I hope that gives you a sort of general introduction to what the paper covers, but very happy, obviously, to take questions and go into more detail on anything.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Firstly, I realised I should have done this. Is my mistake as chair, but I didn't propose a break between the two items for a comfort break if anyone needs one. Is that something that the committee requires? It'd be odd, obviously, to have you present the paper and then for us to take 5 minutes, but I did want to bring it up in case it was.
I was going to just pop out once people started asking questions. You're happy for me to do that, Chair?
I think that at the risk of putting you in a strange position of having talked to us and then taking a break in the meeting directly afterwards, I do think it's advisable to do that and best for everybody. So we will just take a couple of minutes. Sorry for this odd structuring of the meeting, but we'll take a couple of minutes for a comfort break and then we'll come back after that. So the time right now is 8:28 and we'll let you back in 5 minutes. That's going to be 8:33. Okay. Okay, I think we're ready to restart the meeting. Thanks for your patience while we took our comfort break. Tom, you indicated that you wanted to add something quickly before we come back.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to add that as I talked through the paper, we dealt with the North Peckham heat network and the other heat networks in the borough. What I didn't move on to say was that in the latter part of the paper, we asked the question, does the council have a plan? And I think it would be a fair question for residents and committee members to ask. Why is gas consumption so high on the North Peckham estate without the council necessarily jumping on it sooner than it has done? And I think what I'm trying to address in this latter part of the paper is that the heat network strategy approved by Cabinet in 2021 was really the start of a journey of greater investment, greater scrutiny, greater investigation and development of the improvements that are required in the heat networks. And we have a very large heat network estate, as you know, with over 100 boiler houses, and it will take a lot of time. And there needs to therefore be a lot of prioritisation of the works that take place. So there's a list in paragraph 35 of all of the projects that have happened over the last couple of years already. The reason why North Peckham estate hasn't had a lot of investment in the distribution network, although it is having a new boiler house installed as we speak, is that other estates were even higher priority, not in terms of gas consumption necessarily, but in terms of other metrics, such as the reliability and the number of outages. And we've already been to scrutiny on that several times, as you know, to deal with the outages that residents have experienced. In the heat network strategy, we talked about three main things. We want all of our heat networks to be reliable, affordable, and low carbon. And it is in that order because obviously people need to be warm in their homes to have reliable heating and hot water. So that is the priority. So wherever issues of reliability have come up, we've had to address those first. And that's often the reason why we've replaced boilers or underground mains in estates that perhaps use less gas than the North Peckham estate, because we're really focusing in on that reliable factor. But affordable and low carbon are also critical, as we realise, and we are moving through. We've done 10 feasibility studies over the last 12 to 18 months, and we're now at the beginning of a curve of needing to move from feasibility stage into delivery phase, and that will result in improvements to efficiency as well. So just to say, we are at the beginning of a journey. We're not blind to the challenges that face us. And then the final point to make is that there is upcoming market regulation. So the heat network market regulations will be coming into force next year, 2025, at which point Ofgem will be a regulator of all heat networks in the country. The council will have to apply to Ofgem to have a license to operate heat networks. And this is a good thing. Residents will have more consumer protection on heat networks than ever before, and the council will have increased scrutiny than ever before. And that is a good thing. We welcome that because we want to provide as good a service as possible to residents. But I just wanted to finish off that presentation of the paper that I started.
Thanks very much, Tom. I mean, there's a few things that kind of arise from this, from the paper and from issues that prompted it. I want to let the committee come in. I think I'm seeing hands already, but I think you sort of touched on a sort of explanation for how this arose, which is essentially that we have historically there have perhaps been deficiencies in the maintenance or management of the heat networks, and that post 2021 there's been an ongoing effort to improve, and that this is part of the legacy of that. That's sort of what you were saying. I think that the prior to 2021 things should have been done or that were not done, and post 2021 we're now in a phase of improving things. So I guess my question is, do you see coming out of this particular thing, I suppose what that would suggest, I guess, is that everything that has arisen as a result of this, the work that was done by the leaseholder group, kind of data that came out of it and the picture that it painted, was something that the council was already familiar with. And is that the case, I suppose, or do you see in this, given, and I think it's important to stress as well that the part of the reason why we've brought this to scrutiny is that the scale of the problem is quite notably high. So, you know, it is eye-catchingly large amounts of additional gas consumption than what you expect by, you know, in multiples than what you expect. And so do you draw any further lessons from this in terms of how we are either monitoring or maintaining our networks, things that we should have been doing more recently than 2021? Obviously, things like the large-scale investments required to upgrade networks are things that, where you get into issues of priorities and it's very time-consuming and so on. And this is also a problem which perhaps is easier to fly under the radar when energy is relatively cheap, and then when it becomes expensive, it becomes much more of an issue for residents. But do you see other lessons to be drawn since 2021 or in the very recent, past since this has arose, where you see that we should have done things differently?
Yes, I think that's a good question. So you're right in your assertion. It's not new data to us. We have had all of the data, and the Heat Network Strategy 2021 contained this data as well. The gas consumption per dwelling was one of the key metrics that we used in prioritising what works should happen next and which sites should have detailed feasibilities on, alongside data on the outages, the percentage of availability in the year that each heat network was operating as it should have done, also alongside resident satisfaction data from a borough-wide consultation that we ran, and overheating data that residents reported to us. So there were several metrics that were looked at in developing the heat network strategy and prioritising, but gas consumption was one of them. So it's not new data, but yes, the second question I think is there anything further that we've learned as this part of this review? And I think I've tried to tackle that in paragraph 39 in particular, not so much in recruitment, although that's a challenge, but in energy management. We did do the gas analysis back in 2021. It's not something that we've done every year since then. You don't always detect trends from one year to the next because you get weather patterns, you get boiler replacements, you get various factors. But I think the annual repetition of that analysis is something that the council should be doing. One of the things we pointed out in the second bullet point is that currently the energy management function in terms of procurement sits within not the housing department, but the environment, neighbourhoods and growth department. They purchase all of the gas and electricity for the whole council, corporate, leisure, schools, housing, and yet the housing department is the one that uses obviously the gas within the housing heat networks. And so having perhaps a different model is currently under review with the procurement of the laser framework to potentially have a centralised energy procurement function, but a more distributed energy management function, so that there's more resource in the different departments that have the services that use the energy, so that the analysis and that management of the energy is closer to the service, and that might yield better lessons and capturing those lessons and sort of having a tighter feedback loop, if you like.
Thanks for that. Just to follow up on this, if the council was already aware of this as a problem, when it was raised by the estate, should it not have been relatively straightforward to say to them at an earlier stage before, because I think quite a large amount of work has been done over quite a long period of time. Do you feel that you should have been saying earlier to them, or that Southwark should have been saying earlier to them, you're absolutely right, you have discovered something which is a significant issue with this particular district heating network and others across the borough. Here's the reasons why, here's the plans to fix it, etc., etc. I mean, I think you sort of mentioned this a little bit in the point about this question about efficiency, because some of our own communication, this has had some media attention and so on, has sort of emphasised the efficiency of the network, and it's really this thing of cost efficiency versus gas consumption efficiency. And I suppose the response will be that, well, the volume of gas that we're using doesn't actually make up, so if you can sort of look at that in a quite concrete way, really, and you can see that it's not balanced out by the efficiencies in terms of where it's the cost of buying the gas and of the shared maintenance costs and so on. So do you think that it was sort of handled wrong in terms of how that element of it, and the speaking to the residents who raised the problem.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think, to be honest, it was handled quite slowly, but I wouldn't say wrongly. And the reason why is that North Peckham, as I've tried to point out in sort of paragraph 17 to 20-ish, is unique in the council in that it's an intermediate pressure gas supply. What that means is that the gas that goes through the meter is basically squashed, and it's the only site of that type that we have in the borough. And so when the initial question came in from residents about whether the gas consumption was particularly high, and we looked into the underlying data to check that, the meter readings that we take did not align with the bills for the reason that there was a correction to the volume because of the higher pressure that the gas is supplied under. And due to that, because it was the only one in the borough, that confused me personally for a while. I dug and I dug and I dug because I really wanted to understand why is the gas meter reading different to what we're being billed? Is there a mistake in the billing, or is there a reason why the billing is 30% higher as it is than the gas meter indicates it ought to be? And it was down to this intermediate pressure regime. But it took me personally a while to go through questioning Laser, questioning Corona, the gas supplier, questioning the meter asset manager. We had to have multiple site visits, photographs of the meter and the corrector, and then multiple meetings with the suppliers and the meter asset manager to dig into exactly how do you calculate this correction factor to justify a 30% increase between the volumetric reading of the meter and the billed quantity. Having got to the end of that process, which took quite a long time, we were satisfied that all of the correct processes were being followed, the meter was being properly maintained, all of the equipment was being properly calibrated. But I felt that I didn't want to give a response to residents before having gone through that extensive system of checks.
Okay, I'm seeing hands. I'm sorry, but I do want to ask one more thing. I know I've asked questions. But the final thing is about the ultimate solution to this problem, or amelioration of it, requiring a upgrading of the networks, and something that one of the issues that came out from this is that it is an older system and it doesn't use the latest, like it's 4 pipes rather than 2 pipes, which results in more loss of heat. It will require substantial amounts of investment to resolve the issue, and I imagine that will entail further costs on leaseholders because of the sharing of those costs. So this might be more of a question for Hakeem, or perhaps it's a political question really, about, is that something that we feel is kind of inevitable? Is it justified? Is it something where we would have to, because of the scale of the financial burdens that we'd be asking people to bear, that we would look at capping costs or other measures to ameliorate the costs for leaseholders as a result of this? I suppose from the perspective of the residents who receive the bills, if they have discovered that they use a very inefficient system which drives up their costs, to then be told that the resolution to this will entail a further very sizable bill is a quite a bitter pill to swallow for them. So I want your thoughts on that essentially.
It's a difficult one, Councillor Foster, Chair, I should say. Because you are right. To correct an inefficient system may mean cost, and if there are costs, then the right thing to do would be to share those costs with leaseholders. But generally, and of course, there is a cost to tenants, which is in their rent already. But generally, we are looking at a generally more efficient system, heating system, going to all of our boilers. And Tom will share that, which inevitably will reduce the bills for everybody.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, Hakeem, you're referring to the fact that we have plans to develop a borough-wide expansion of our cell chip heat network, which, as most of you probably know, already takes low carbon waste heat, which is lower cost to the council from the Celtic facility up into several housing estates in Bermondsey.
You're welcome to explain further, because of course residents will do this.
Yeah. So the Celtic facility is a waste incineration facility and energy recovery facility just across the border in Lewisham that generates large amounts of heat and uses that heat to generate steam, uses the steam to generate electricity, and it also has excess waste heat, which they do not have a useful use for. So in 2013, the council signed a heat supply agreement with Veolia, who are the operator of the Celtic facility, to purchase waste heat from that facility. Veolia built a network of pipes from the Celtic facility to Bermondsey to 4 of our housing estates and boiler houses in that area. That currently serves 2,600 homes in that area and supplies low carbon, low cost heat to those properties. Tenants and residents and leaseholders on those estates over the last couple of years have really benefited from the lower price of heat as energy bills across the world have gone up. The cost of that heat has stayed relatively stable, so there have been some significant savings to residents, particularly leaseholders and freeholders connected to those estates. And we have a plan to extend that heat network across the Old Kent Road and into Peckham to connect several additional housing estates. It's not finalised. We're still going through design consultation processes, and there's a lot more resident consultation to do. So I was reminded by Chris earlier that we must go and speak to the SGTO again and get their help in reaching all the TRAs on this important project. But we have been already presenting to area forums and homeowner forums on this matter, and we will do again as the plans develop to make sure that people are kept in the loop. So that is an aspiration that we would like to develop in the coming 12 months or so to get low carbon, lower cost heat to a number of the housing estates in the Peckham area, one of which would be potentially North Peckham. So that would lead to a reduction in people's heating bills. In addition to that, just touching on your point about the costs involved in upgrading heat networks to make them more efficient. Yes, costs are inevitable. However, they're not always extortionate, because some of the changes that might be needed can be controls-based changes, which are not always too expensive. Other times, you're able to repurpose pipes to just act in a more efficient way. So a 4-pipe system can often be repurposed into a 2-pipe system, not by installing 2 new pipes, but by decommissioning 2 of the 4 and retaining 2 of the 4 and changing the system of delivery from those 2 pipes into the dwellings. So that can be a lower cost way of improving the efficiency of the networks. And then finally, there are grants available in the network, so in the market, that the council would certainly aim to access if we did have expensive works like that. And I've listed again in the report various instances of where we've been successful in accessing grants to help pay for upgrades to heat networks.
Thanks, Tom. I know Councillor Hargrove wants to speak, and then I'll.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very glad that this has come to Commission. Thank you. Presentations. Learned quite a bit already. You, Tom. Want to say for a start that North Peckham, Lost Groves district heating network hasn't been that reliable over the years. I don't want to give the impression it may not have been the worst, but certainly has had considerable unreliability. Thank the engineering services, but with valiant effort, things going over the experience of their work. Good. Got some questions, and they're not too much, but one following on the back of what you've just asked and the way you've answered that in terms of leaseholder cost. My first question was one I'm going to ask last, but there's some new build properties on Commercial Way being attached to the North Peckham district. Some are council, some are shared ownership, and the people who are looking to buy those shared ownership properties will they face the same extortionate charges for heating and not water? And is the council disclosing this to buyers?
So thank you for the question,
Tom,
Councillor.
I think Barry should probably ask more because there's going to be a lot of contributions. It's easy to get all the.
Have you calculated how much heat is lost on the North Peckham? Oh, it's very inefficient. And this is it's an historical question, I suppose. That historical, maybe 3 years ago, but why was the North Peckham Boiler House Renewal Commission without a heat network optimism study? A typical household on a council-run heat network is using roughly 65% more gas, which is heating and hot water, than for all its gas uses. How much more is that costing them than a typical household will be paying on an individual boiler?
Mr. Chair, Barry, what's the total number of questions?
One more.
Can you do one more?
Yeah, one more. Yeah. I mean, this is just. I think this is a very good report because it's about showing the loss of heat in these systems and the inefficiency of them. It doesn't really capture the hardship that is behind all these solar charges. And there is some very, very serious hardship behind that. So I want to just ask, and I really appreciate what you said earlier, that people have always believed that district heating is more efficient. But, we now know in this particular aspect, they're not. So even though the council for a long time has said district heating system is better for people than having their own boiler would be, I suppose it's a rhetorical question, but would you be willing to swap your energy bills with someone living on a council? And, well, I mean, it's a rhetorical question. Thank you.
Thanks, Tommy.
Okay, I think I got them all, but come back to me after if I missed some. So I think the first one was, will the new build properties on Commercial Way be paying the same as other properties on the North Peckham heat network? And the answer to that is no, and there's a particular reason why. Under the heat metering billing regulations, all new homes that are built have to have their own individual heat meter, and only certain properties, only certain existing properties have to have a heat meter installed. So in 2021, we had to go through a cost effectiveness test for all of our homes on heat networks in the borough. And that was effectively a look at whether, in 2021 gas prices, I should add, whether it would be cost effective to pay for and run heat meters in these compared with the amount of gas and energy bill saving for people. That process found around 1,000 homes in the borough, existing homes, should have heat meters installed, and we're most of the way through installing those. We've got about 900 now. But North Peckham Estate was not one of the ones that had to have heat meters retrofitted. But because the commercial way property is obviously new property, they do have to have heat meters, and they do have them. Once you have a heat meter, you have to bill people according to consumption. So there is now in place a heat metering policy, which is on the website, people can read, which effectively outlines how we plan to do heat metering and how we plan to charge people with heat meters. Broadly speaking, tenants in the borough pay a certain borough-wide tariff, so mirroring people who don't have heat meters, who pay a borough-wide weekly charge regardless of actual heat consumption, because we don't know how much heat people use. Those tenants with heat meters pay a borough-wide tariff, but that tariff is then multiplied by their actual consumption, which we can now measure to calculate a specific weekly charge for them based on how much they use. So that's how tenants pay for heat when they have a heat meter. Leaseholders also pay for what they use once they have a heat meter, but the tariff is specific to their particular estate that they're on, because the leases specify that people have to pay for a share of the actual costs incurred by the council. So we have to calculate a tariff that is bespoke to that network. So therefore, tenants moving into the commercial way development will be paying for the heat that they use on the borough-wide tariff. Homeowners, shared owners moving into the commercial way new development will be paying for a heat that they use, but on a North Peckham specific tariff. So that tariff effectively just recovers the gas cost of running the network. Any maintenance, repair costs are dealt with separately outside in other service charges. So in answer to the question, do they pay the same? They will be paying the same in terms of share of repair maintenance. They'll be paying a slightly different calculation on the gas apportionment because we know how much heat they use individually.
Just to clarify that, so from what you're saying, the people in shared ownership properties on the new builds will be specifically the people in shared ownership will be exposed to the same heating bills as there's the leaseholders on the North Peckham estate, from what you were saying, because they are on a state specific tariff as opposed to the tenants who are running borough-wide. That's what I understood from what you said. Is that wrong?
So the leaseholders will be in the new builds will be contributing to the same gas bill as the existing homes, but in a slightly different apportionment because we can see how much gas they use, and so there's an apportionment. So the current homeowners and leaseholders on the North Peckham Glasgrove estates effectively pay for the gas bill via a bedroom weighting apportionment. Those with heat meters will be paying via a heat meter consumption apportionment.
So I guess the concrete question is: are you seeing the same burdens? Is your bill as high, or will it be lower as a result of the heat meters? Do you have a sense of how much, why, or?
Yeah, so it's really too early to tell because very few people have actually moved into that estate. But I mean, my expectation would be they are new builds with much better insulation levels, and therefore the heat consumption will be much lower, and therefore their portion will be much lower. And the second factor is we know when people have heat meters, they use less heat because there's a financial direct incentive to use less, and therefore for two reasons they're likely to pay less.
Sorry, I've extended one of many questions.
So in terms of question 2, have we calculated the heat loss specifically through the network on the North Peckham estate? The answer to that one is no, and the reason for that is that we physically can't do that until we have heat meters. So obviously, you measure the gas that goes into the boiler house. That we do. Once we've got the new boilers fully installed, which should be in a couple of months' time, we will have heat meters to measure all of the heat that leaves the boiler house to go through the primary and secondary network to reach the dwellings. In order to know how much heat is lost, you really then need a meter at every dwelling entry point as well, because then you can say, well, we've delivered 80 units of heat, but we sent 100 into the network at the boiler house, therefore we've lost 20. Until you've got the dwelling heat meters, you can't physically calculate how much heat loss there is. In terms of question 3, why was the North Peckham Boiler House commissioned without a full optimisation study? So I think the main reason for that is that the boilers in the boiler house were ancient and failed, and the site has been on temporary boilers since I think around 2020. So if I remember rightly, sort of 2021, as we'd kind of looked at the options, which were broadly, should you completely dissolve the heat network and give everybody gas boilers, or completely dissolve the heat network and give everybody electric heating, or do you reinvest and get the boiler house back up and running so that you're not paying constant higher costs of temporary boilers? Of those 3, there was an appraisal done, but it wasn't an appraisal of the network distribution, it was an appraisal of the overall choices about whether you dissolve the network or whether you reinvest in the boiler house. And the reinvestment in the boiler house came out as being more cost effective. So without doing an assessment of the network losses, it was still deemed appropriate to do the boiler house investment. And the 4th one, how much more cost because of 65% more gas? That's a really difficult question to answer because gas prices go up and down. So obviously, if you use 65% more gas and your gas cost is 1.8p, which it was 3-4 years ago, then the answer is not that much. If you use 65% more gas and your gas price is 8p, which it was last year, it's a really different answer. So So, and then the other factor is that a lot is a very multifaceted equation to calculate a heating service charge bill, and you'd probably need my homeowner service charge bill colleagues here to explain it to you fully, but a lot of the cost of a heating service charge comes down to maintenance and repair, as well as pure gas and electrical elements for running pumps and things in plant rooms. So I'm saying I can't answer the question. It's quite a complicated one to answer, but this paper mainly deals with kilowatt hours of gas, which is a bit blunt because people really care about pounds rather than kilowatt hours. But pounds is really a different question and is quite multifaceted. So we probably need to come back with a whole other paper to deal with comparing how much do people pay in pounds and how does that break down in pie charts for maintenance and repair and gas and electricity and all the rest of it. And maybe that's a topic for a future paper, but I probably can't answer it now.
Okay, great. I've got Councillor Harper next, and then to me, and then Sun. So we're going down.
Thank you. So I was looking at the list of boilers and plant rooms which have had work done to them already. And then I just cross-referenced a few of those with the kilowatt per hour per property information in Appendix 1. And I noticed there's quite a few which still have significantly higher than the Ofgem average. So Aylesbury Estate is at 17, Brimington and Pomeroy 18, Consort Newington 22, Primrose House 25, and that's just a few of those. So given that those are all boilers and rooms which have had work done, what is that a concern that they've still got such high kilowatt, like high compared to the average per household? And is that something which is being addressed, or is that at this point we're happy with that?
Thank you for the question. No, certainly not happy. So I think the main answer to that is that it depends what work has happened. So at the Aylesbury Estate, the boiler house has been renewed, but the underground mains are still the same as before. And as I'm sure you know, the Aylesbury Estate is slowly being shrunk down as different parts of it get packaged off for redevelopment. So that's quite a complicated instance. I could cite systems like the Albert Barnes House and the Masterman House, where the works that was done was a lot more extensive. So at those estates, the boiler house was done, the distribution pipe work was done, dwelling internals were done. Each property was given a heat meter and a heat interface unit. So effectively, what you've got there is a whole new system with modern generation, modern distribution, good controls, and good distribution inside the dwelling as well. If you look at the heat consumption for those ones, you should see, I hope, that the gas consumption per dwelling is much better. Well, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for this report. Really good report, good and thorough. Just a couple of questions. So in terms of the next steps for North Peckham, good to have those bulleted next steps. I think you mentioned the refurbishment of the boiler house will be the next month-ish. Give me a sense of time, please. And then the other one was just a sort of question around the upcoming regulation. You mentioned in the report that it's difficult at the present time to press ahead with more that regulation that comes into effect. Could you just help me understand why that is?
Thank you. So paragraph 29 talks about the next steps for the North Peckham heat network and the timelines for those. So the installation of a heat meter at Duke School, we've requested a quote which should have arrived already, but it hasn't, but it is imminent, and we would basically be wanting to press ahead with that immediately. So that should be done in the next month or two. Complete refurbishment of boiler house, as I said, that should be completed in the next couple of months. Simon, you might have the latest on that to add. Carrying out heat network optimization study, I actually had a meeting on this with a consultant yesterday because there is a grant that can help you fully fund optimization studies as well as capital work. So again, it's the heat network efficiency scheme. You can apply for both optimization study funding at 100%, as well as then going on to apply for capital funding at a rate of 50%. So the next round for applying for the HNES revenue grant is November the 8th, and my plan is to have a grant application submitted for that. That would then mean that we have to wait a couple of months while government decide whether they're going to give us the money, but we would then hope to start the optimisation study in March and probably complete it by June, July time next year. So that's not as soon as we would like, but that's probably the quickest realistic time frame that we can put forwards if we're going to apply for a grant, which is always good. It's likely dwelling installation, dwelling heat meter installation. So this was then linked, I think, to your second question about regulation. Yeah, so why can we not move ahead with dwelling heat meter installations until we have a bit more information about the regulations? So mainly this is to do with the fact that government is about to consult in the autumn on consumer protection regulations and minimum standards, minimum technical standards for how heat networks should operate, and that will include things like where you have to install heat meters. The likelihood is that we will either be pushed to do more heat meters, so they'll make the cost effectiveness test easier to pass, so you have to do more, or they'll remove the cost effectiveness test altogether and say, as long as it's technically feasible, you will have to do heat meters. We don't yet know which way that will go. We also don't know if they say to us, you have to do heat meters everywhere where it's technically feasible, what they will require us to do alongside that. So in the current heat metering billing regulations, you can't just give people heat meters, you have to give them heat meters and certain levels of controls. Otherwise, you're effectively asking somebody to pay for something that they can't control. So most of our properties have thermostatic radiator valves as a minimum. Where we're installing heat meters at the moment, we're also installing room thermostats so that people can quickly turn off heating in the whole property just with one device. But the new regulations may ask us to fit other control timers or smart controls that are available through mobile phone apps. And until those regulations come and tell us what we need to do, it would be a shame to access every property on the North Beckham estate to fit a heat meter and then have to go back a few months later to fit something else. So that's really why that's frustrating, but why we're waiting for more. And the final bullet point is on cell chip, which I think we've covered. Best estimate for we would like to do that as soon as possible, but we're still in a commercialization phase with Veolia. We're awaiting their financial proposal to us for how much it would cost. Mainly that would cost them, because the model for cell chip is that they put the funding forwards and we buy heat off them in the boiler houses on a bulk rate for 25 years. But whether that is a good deal for the council and for tenants and for homeowners, the devil is always in the detail, so we can't make a decision to move that forwards until a final financial proposal from Veolia.
Councillor Lamb.
Thanks, yeah. Thank you. I just want to ask you a question. On page 7 of the report, paragraph 39, bullet point 2. Without reading everything, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind expatiating more on what you mean by energy, all the various explanations relating to the energy management statement there. And that's my first question. And then the second question is, I was wondering whether there has been any comparative advantage measure in relation to the district heating network over having private heating system, in terms of cost efficiency. Thank you. And by the way, well done with the report. It's very user friendly, leader friendly. So I really enjoy it.
Thank you. So on the first question, expanding on that energy management bullet point in paragraph 39, yeah, what I was trying to drive at there really was that while at the moment we have the central procurement of energy management of energy within the environment Neighbourhoods and Growth Department, it would be beneficial, I think, and there's been a service review in that team as part of the laser re-procurement exercise that says, yes, we get better rates by buying, energy in bulk, and that therefore makes sense that all of the council departments are pulled together for the procurement element. But the fact that the housing service is the one that's using all of the gas in the boiler houses means that there should be more of a tie between those who pay the bills, which at the moment is in a different department to housing, and those who use the energy. Obviously, I speak to my colleagues in that energy management team, and the homeowner service charge colleagues are always speaking to the colleagues in the energy management team. But having dedicated staff within different services who are, responsible specifically for the energy management within that department is something that's being looked at the moment as a model that might be beneficial. In terms of the second point, have we done anything to compare the cost of running individual heating systems? Yes, thank you, Simon. Yeah, so we one of the estates in the council that has district heating, Dighton Court, a pretty extensive feasibility study and options appraisal was done before the decision was made to renew the boiler house recently, and that did compare the cost of individual gas boilers to communal gas boilers, and found that communal gas, due to bulk purchase, due to centralised maintenance, etc., was more cost effective. There are also independent assessments of individual gas boilers and the cost of that. And I think the Heat Trust have an independent calculator, so residents sometimes have used that to compare against their communal heating bills. I think that's probably all I've got to say on that.
Sorry, Chair. So we say for a resident that buys his or energy directly as a private homeowner, benefits more than buying into the council communal system. A very layman understanding.
I think it is really difficult to answer because the systems vary from site to site so much. We've seen in Appendix 1 that the gas consumption per property varies significantly from sort of 20s, mid-20s, high 20s even, down to 12 or below. So the gas cost varies substantially therefore, particularly when the gas price is high, which it is at the moment. And then, of course, there's other factors such as the repair and the maintenance. And again, those factors can vary a lot between estates. So it's probably another piece of work to kind of appraise that, I think.
That's fantastic.
Thank you, Chair. Also, thank you for the presentation as well. I actually live on Costa Group Estate, so I'm very familiar with some of the things that, especially the residents, who go through. There has been a long-standing track record of the council or the heating system, district heating system breaking down. So, and we have a TMO there as well. So these things have been going on right from when I was a TRA. So we used to have these plateaus. But all the time they keep telling us, okay, we are working on the boiler house, we are refurbishing it, and by the time that is done, you will have your heating system will be uninterrupted. So my question is, noted here that I think you have a timeline of 3 months for completion of the refurbishment of the boiler house. What's going to be different? That's my, I'm not, without being cynical, because of the promises that we've received in the past. And also, why is it that this, when did you start this refurbishment? Because I noticed that most of the work are usually being done around autumn or thereabout. That's when the refurbishment, the to start. So what's going to be different, and when is when did this refurbishment start? And the other question is, there was a point in time that residents were looking to opt out of the district heating system, and were kind of discouraged by the council. So if residents want to opt out, what's the benefit, similar to what my Tony asked, and what's the benefit, and also how is that feasible?
So in terms of the benefit of renewing the boiler house, so there'll be brand new boilers, brand new pumps, brand new pipe work, brand new controls, brand new electrical supply, brand new heat exchangers. So everything will be brand new and much more reliable and more efficient. I think what will change when we get to the end of this project in 3 months' time, specifically, will be that we have much better control. So at the moment on temporary boilers, you have limited flexibility in setting the controls on the temporary boilers. With the new boilers and the new control system, we'll have full remote visibility of all the settings and the ability to change things. Primarily, that will enable us to affect pump speeds and temperatures, and that should hopefully lead to a reduction in the heat losses in the primary network. I'm not saying that it will make everything perfect, because, as you know, and as we've already covered, there will still be vulnerabilities within the distribution network. I'm aware that within the Gloucester Grove estate in particular, some of the risers need replacing, and that's another project which we've got programmed in, because they keep leaking. We've replaced a few, but the rest of them need doing. Right. Okay. So things will improve when the new boilers are up and running, but it won't make the system perfect by any stretch. In terms of discouraging people to opt out, so yeah, there is a disconnection policy for district heating systems, and we do discourage people from disconnecting from district heating systems, because district heating systems are one of those things that you either have it or you don't have it. It doesn't really work to have a pepper pot approach of every third property in the block being connected, because you still have to pay the maintenance engineers to visit the boiler house. You still have the same length of pipework that loses heat. You still have all of the kind of checks and balances that you have to do, but you've got a third of the people contributing to the gas bill, the network losses, the maintenance, the repair, etc. So it's more cost effective if everybody stays connected. Therefore, we do discourage disconnection, and there is a process. Leaseholders, I think, are not normally permitted to disconnect under the terms of their leases. Freeholders are normally permitted to, but they have to pay a disconnection fee, which is effectively a forward payment towards maintenance and repair costs, which would otherwise be shared amongst the other residents still connected to that district heating system. So we do discourage it for those reasons. District heating is better, everybody in or everybody out. So given that we have a decarbonisation approach for district heating, we know how we're likely to decarbonise heat networks. It's better for the council's low carbon ambitions that everybody stays on district heating. We can then connect cell chip, we can connect heat pumps, we can decarbonise whole estates at one go. At the same time, improving the service that people get through better customer protection, heat meters, better controls, better efficiency. And so there is a bright future for heat networks, but at the moment, not all heat networks operate as well as we want them to, and that's a sad reality.
Because people were not
about
getting the service.
I was going to ask you to put microphone on, but
So I think the reason why because currently is not every part of the estate that is connected to the district heating. So, and people that were connected to the district heating were having problems. They were not even getting sometimes they can go for 2 weeks without, or 3 weeks without heating or hot water. So it was really difficult and challenging. So the people consider the option of opting out, and we were told that the cost was just the main issue. So if the refurbishment, like I said, goes very well, and we do hope that people will be having their heating as normal and things will go very well. But I think the council should also be looking at options to make sure that people for this, especially in the middle of the winter, don't have to stay without water and heating, especially those with children.
Thank you. That's the salmon, and then we'll probably have to move towards. I did have another thing I wanted to ask before the end, but we'll close soon.
Thank you, Chair. Do you read the meters? I'm due to get my service charge around now for last year. But when I spoke to Louise and said, do you read the meters before to calculate? She sort of rolled her eyes a bit. And sorry, Louise, if you do watch this. She didn't answer, but do you actually make a point of reading the meters before they start calculating my service charge? And because somewhere along the line years ago, when the Haygate was pulled down, the poor little Salisbury found themselves with massive service charges because they read the meter before they pulled the boilers out and suddenly went, oh dear, we haven't been, charging them correctly. So if you could just answer that. And the other thing is, and I don't want anyone to start twitching, but I do live on the Congreve and Barlow. After you change the boiler, the costs that estate must have been for you, for the number of people you had to come out to change their pipes. Not the boiler. The boiler was functioning quite well, but people's pipes weren't fit for the purpose of the new boiler. And I ended up paying for people getting new copper pipes in and things like that. And then we had the incident where the water was pouring out from Eugene Cotter, which, went on for months and months and months. And arbitration had more people coming from Eugene Cotter to demand money, because of loss of heating and hot water. Please tell me that you've learned lessons from the Congreve and Barlow, because it really was a failure of the pipes running to the houses, the other properties, not necessarily the boiler. I don't remember the boiler collapsing at all. And being, I know it was old, but you know what? Sometimes old things really can do quite well. And so maybe, just saying, so maybe we need to look at the pipes first before we go immediately to the boiler and then blow everything up. Anyway, there we go. Oh, Simon, are you going to say something now?
To give you some assurance, yes, we do look at the pipes. A really good example, because it's most recent, is Dighton Court. That very reason. What we do now is what we didn't do before, is that when we do the feasibility, we do a really robust feasibility, which includes pipe samples. They go away to a UCAS approved laboratory where they then do some very technical assessments on the degrading percentage of the pipework. And at Dighton Court, actually, we initially were under the impression that we may have had to replace the pipes because they were really old. But being prudent, we undertook independent UCAS assessed pipe cuts, taken away, checked, and we didn't have to replace them. So yes, absolutely. Yeah, we do pipe sampling on all our boiler replacements because it's the right thing to do.
We definitely do read gas meters. Yeah. Every month, the maintenance contractors read meters and they fill in a spreadsheet. It comes to us. It goes to the gas supplier. The gas supplier also do their own independent meter readings. So yes, the answer is yes.
Inna.
This is a quick question. For the past 7 years in my position, I was in touch with literally thousands of leaseholders across the borough, and all of them, they raise issues with the central heating, as we heard in the forum as well. So my question is, could you give an example of 1, 2, 3 estates where actually Southwark believe that some efficiencies have been brought and they're tangible, because I haven't heard anyone and I want to contact those estates. So which estates have been identified as positive impact?
So which estates have benefited from having good, efficient heat networks? Is that the question? I mean, I would say perhaps Albert Barnes and Masterman House, they had in 2019, 2020, complete system renewal, so new boilers, distribution pipework, heat interface units, heat meters, controls. So the whole block was renewed. And as we've noted in the previous question, the gas consumption per dwelling there is quite modest, much better than the average in the borough. Leaseholders, of course, had to contribute towards the costs of those works, but they now have started paying for the heat that they use on the heat meter, as have tenants, and that's also having a beneficial impact on people's heating bills. So they're paying even less than, on average, than people without heat meters on district heating, but that's because they've got a relatively modern, well-designed, efficient system, and they're being charged for what they use. So the heat network is operating on the whole the way it should do.
So it's 1 estate.
There was 2.
It's 2 estates.
Yeah, sure.
It's Appendix 1 is quite useful to see like the efficiency, and there are quite a few which have much better efficiency and much closer to the average.
Great, thanks. Just one last thing before we go. This is, I guess, a question for Hakeem, probably mostly. Thank you for sticking out for a couple of long items. But it's about the upcoming regulation. And as is touched on in the paper, the regulation involves additional consumer protection and some new technical standards. Given the current sort of state of things, and in the context of the plans to improve the network, and I guess the timeline which it will take to do those things, what do you see are the regulatory risks that we face from this regulation with the network as it stands? Do you think that we will be exposed to a material level of regulatory risk from inefficiencies in the network or any other things that may fall afoul of new consumer protection or technical standards?
I mean, the short answer is I don't know. What is required at the moment, some are clear, some aren't. And we all know that our network heating system is quite old. There are some inefficiencies in it. The ideal situation would be to install meters, that enables meters and controls in each dwelling that enables people to, one, control the heating in their own homes, and secondly, therefore only pay for what they use. That's the ultimate goal, but there is a cost to doing that. So our objectives are, to have the most efficient heating system that we can have, which is why we're having that discussion with Veolia. And secondly, for people to end up only paying for what they use. And that's what we're going to drive our strategy. That's what our strategy is going to drive us toward.
All right, thanks. If there's no other questions from the committee, I don't see any others. Thanks very much to the 3 of you for coming this evening. And we'll move on. You're welcome to depart. Or you're welcome to stay. You're also welcome to stay and do whatever you want. Oh, you do? Oh, yeah, good. Good. I hope they've enjoyed it. Right. So let's move on now or it's worth summarising the discussion, talking about what we might recommend as a result of it. I think part of the issues that we face in recommending remedies for this are to do with not really knowing what this regulation will entail, because I do think that the actions the council to be taking will depend on that, and a lot of the risks that results will depend on that. The other question that we're kind of faced with is about the situation for leaseholders in particular. I think there is a judgment to be made about how much this kind of boils down to problems with the leaseholder model and the way that it exposes leaseholders to costs, and the extent to which it's not that, and that it's down to mismanagement by the council. And I'm sort of agnostic a bit on this question, and I'm certainly interested to hear what other members of the committee think about this. It seems like, based on this, what needs to happen is an upgrade of the heating network. That will be very expensive to an extent. I mean, Tom kind of mentioned ways in which it might not be as prices you might worry, but it will be a costly thing, and that will have an impact on leaseholders. The challenge is I can see downsides or reasons not to try to recommend a situation where we are capping costs for leaseholders or providing other forms of financial compensation to leaseholders, basically transferring a financial burden from them onto the council, essentially for resourcing reasons. That it's the very model itself results in costs for leaseholders which can be staggeringly high and kind of not justifiable in a moral way, but it is the result of the model itself. And so whether it should be the council that then takes on the burden of some of that is not clear to me, I would say. And it doesn't seem to me that this issue is exactly like other ones that we've looked at, where there is a very obvious, the issues that came particularly to overview and scrutiny last year in major works, so one where there was really clear mismanagement. And I don't know that we have seen that is obviously the case here. I think we can see that there's an inadequate heating network and it's not efficient enough. But that, of course, is quite a historic problem. So do any members of the committee have a view on what we might recommend? The final thing I would mention in terms of possible recommendations is the report does flag these itself. They are not related to compensation for leaseholders, but there is things like the need for more staff resource in their team, and the point that Tom made, which I suppose is slightly kind of technical, but is to do with the centralized management of the energy bills, whether there needs to be staff kind of interacting with the different departments, which does appeal to me, because I think a lot of issues that arise across all sorts of different areas in the council can be to do with things being siloed or bits of the council not talking to each other, and that resulting in problems. We could look to do that, but I don't think that either of those things are really going to address resident concerns, to be perfectly frank. Councillor Hargrove.
Yeah, I didn't look at the cabinet report 2001 on the district.
2021.
Is it 20? Sorry, 20. I say 19. And that's even pre-Soviet. So, but it seems to me that though we're not really strongly criticising, it does really come as a big surprise how little energy is. I don't think we can let them off that hook. So that should have been, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think the situation appears to be that they were entirely aware of it, but that it was kind of one of many things. I think that's at least, that is the claim that we heard this evening. It's my understanding is that it wasn't a surprise, that you could say that there's a kind of complacency in that it wasn't addressed, and didn't have a high profile, perhaps. But I would just ask.
Well, in which case then the interaction between the council and leaseholders done with all thinking of that. That's a lot.
So I have I have a quick thought on that. So that is not something we kind of covered here. Is like the sort of comms aspect of it, or the sort of management of sentiment, or the information given to leaseholders, or how they were treated when they raised the problem stuff. We haven't really looked at that in this commission, and we didn't speak to officers who will be responsible for that strategically. I think it is really important how we treat residents when they raise problems. I guess I'm conscious that we hadn't looked at those mechanisms at this committee, although, if you have a suggestion what we could do as a recommendation around that, we could certainly discuss it. I think the only sort of cautionary thing I feel about that is that it is a second order problem. It's really important and it affects how people experience things, but it is the core problem is obviously your bills. So I think it would be a kind of consolation prize in a way, sort of recommendation, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Looking to leaseholders is a little bit of distracting dichotomy, tenants versus leaseholders. The reality is that the leaseholders are only a barometer for the waste in the council. So those complaints should be taken not because they are leaseholders, it's just because the leaseholders do have visibility. In reality, the tenants pay the same, but they don't have the visibility. So those complaints coming from the leaseholders should look from the direction that actually SADC has to become much more efficient. So we have to change our views, not looking, the leaseholders have to be compensated. Equally, the tenants who do not have this visibility, they have to be considered. So what I would say that the leaseholders' complaints should be seen as a barometer if SADC is efficient or not only for the leaseholders in its rights.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right in what you say. I think the only reason to draw out leaseholders in particular here is because of the size of the bills. If energy costs were low, then the underlying problem would be exactly the same, but the impact would be much less. So the reason only to look at leaseholders is because the concrete question of the bills that they're put on. But I want to see if anyone has proposals for recommendations on site. No, but you're welcome to make a contribution.
Well, it kind of follows on from Ina's point. I think to me that like leaseholder bills, not specifically about the energy usage, but the kind of cost to kind of maintain or rebuild those stuff. Leaseholders would pay their fair share, whereas tenants, it would be paid for by the council and their rents would be adjusted. So basically that is a cost being swallowed by Southwark in the first instance. So to me, that's a kind of it's. I'm always shocked by kind of it feels like the lack of kind of scrutiny of like contracts, the amount of contracts we see where something's been secured, but then the costs go way above what they were for. To me, that's like obviously in a procurement process, have your costing as being part of that, and it feels like that's something Southwark's not doing, is kind of really like pushing back when contracts are going over their planned work, and so that would be kind of house maintenance, and that those kind of questions for Southwark in terms of their HRA. So they won't do work necessarily if it's not considered vital, and if the cost effectiveness is not high enough. So yeah, I guess the kind of thing I'd be interested in is how we not scrutinise, but how we kind of hold actors a high standard of like.
I think that point's definitely well taken. We did look a little bit at this in last year's mission as well, and we had a recommendation around contract procurement. Councillor.
Well, I think that's probably one reason why we may have to revisit, some of these items later. That's my first point. Then the second point is to go back to the question I asked earlier about the comparative cost analysis between people buying the service, system by themselves, buying into the council system, he said he's still going to do some work on it. Now I want to see, I would like to receive a report on that and to complete that comparative analysis. Because to me, with due respect, I'm not a leaseholder. However, I feel that the leaseholders are being used as cash cow in some cases, whereby all the costs, they bear most of the costs. There are contracts which okay, we just want to do this refurbishment, and okay, this is how much is going to, what proportion of the cost is going to go to leaseholders. And I've got a lot of complaints from my house of complaint over the last few years. Cancelled on for 10 years. So it's not making it up. It's 3 people. So we need to find a resolution to it. It may not be today, it may not be next year, but definitely we need to start working towards that. And that information will help us to arrive at that destination of finding a lasting solution.
I think Councillor Hargrave and then Councillor Hicks. I think we'll probably need to begin to move on. Oh, and Ammon as well. It would be great if anyone has proposals and recommendations. But I do want to stress that point. It's good to discuss the issues as well. But that's the first.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the way I see it is this is a piece of the whole work. It came assembly. I don't think in terms of the leaseholders that build for us, probably not the end of the map as far as certainly board councillor. There are people that are really going to be suffering on this. I'd expect to hear more about that. But I think what good work that we've done is that we've brought more information publicly about this. That's the good work that we've done. We've asked searching questions, and it's all out there. And it seems to me like that the officers are taking this seriously. Yes, there's still some work to do, home ownership unit, but I think that, I don't know, I mean, I'd like it to have some silver bullet recommendation. I don't think that is within our grasp, bearing in mind the impact that you rightly pointed of recommending any extra works.
Thank you. So, I mean, I think in terms of this particular case around North Peckham, my sense is, and we're getting around it, that the next steps are sensible next steps. I would hope it's going to see over time with holders, notwithstanding the issue of work, which I say is going to be there for many. I wonder if there's a recommendation around tracking. Had a set of next steps. The officers knew broadly timelines on those. It would make those visible. I don't know whether that's a report to cabinet around timelines on brings to the surface. Here are some timelines. They're publicly visible, and therefore team are accountable in that plan. And then the other one, which I think was already mentioned in paragraph 39 in terms of some of the challenges, it's just sort of something around that recruitment bullet point, which just seems to be a bit of a blocker. Is there anything sort of done to see whether there are options there boosting the recruitment? Are the only two?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say something radical. Let's not. I think they admitted where the fault is. They know exactly what they've done wrong, what they didn't do all those years. Like I said, when my estate was in, they said, we didn't used to do that. We didn't look at the pipes. We know this is in. So, but I liked your second recommendation, the one about recruitment. And I think you've actually touched on something very good. Let's talk to other authorities. Let's maybe pool resources, because we've got an awful lot of estates that have got, communal heating, but not everyone else has. So maybe they have got resources that they could hand out to us. We could share. But other than that, I just don't think there's a recommendation at this point, because I think the next stage is we've got to wait until the government come out, and then meters and what are we going to put in and the costs that there'll be, and will government give us some money to do that, and how quickly can we do it? Again, everybody will have to do it. So maybe if we get together with another authority now, or other authorities, we'll be ready for whatever the recommendation is. You never know.
Ina had a hand up, and then you can come back. Yeah.
Just a thought to the committee. Would it be wise to ask to put not a stop, but to slow down the expansion until it's a little bit more controlled? Because now we have two issues. Is one, we don't have control over the issues which have to be sorted, and at the same time, we are looking for an expansion, which might be a very challenging situation. So would it be a consideration to
Expansion of
suggest
what? Sorry.
the central heating system?
Fellowship expansion.
And any further expansion, because as I understand, it's quite a big policy of expansion. So just food for your thought.
Thanks. Barry, did you make sure you
Going back on what Councillor Salmon said, a couple of things. One is Islington has done a lot of good stuff for reducing energy consumption. Whether that's palatable for Southwark is another. Islington is one council tried to get control of the energy they're using. And the issue that you keep raising about pipe work, ironically, about 7 years ago, all the pipe work on the North Peckham estate, the ones that we're talking about, was removed. So they're now putting the kind of the boiler system. So in investment made in the system.
Just quick on Ina's point before we kind of wrap the discussion. I do think that the at least based on the discussion that we've had and information that we've seen, the issue is in the historic heat networks rather than in the new heat networks. That appears to be the case. The new ones are more efficient and don't represent as much of a the downsides are not as present. So on the basis of at least what we've seen this evening, I don't know if it's a natural recommendation to follow from that. I think we've had a really good, and a thorough discussion around this. I think we're aware of the tricky issues that arise. And it doesn't seem like the committee has an appetite to propose forms of remedy that just involve financial payments to leaseholders of one kind or another. And I think that would include capping costs, compensation payments, and also making it easy to disconnect from the network, which amounts to the same.
I would share.
Really? You're welcome to make the case for that. It's clearly, I think it's certainly something that we should discuss because it's something that is a demand for, the affected people, of course.
Say that we've gone down this avenue, hugely expensive to do it. I mean, it's disproportionate because you have to be cut off from the pipes, then you have to have your own lead in. They were talking about figures of 30,000, depending on where you are. If you're in a house, if you're in a flat, it's hugely expensive to come with the communal heating.
I wasn't suggesting that, and I know that can mess the system up. But what I was suggesting, what I'm thinking we could look at, is that people that, and I know it's happened with major works with some leaseholders. There has been a cap. I think there was. Yes, it's not legal. Sure, it's not possible to cap people's bills of that very punitive charges on.
Sorry, Councillor Hicks was coming in. Then. Sorry, I think it was. Oh, okay, Sonny, and then we'll take it.
I think basically our advice was not to put the cart before the horse. In terms of compensation and so on, I want to leave Because one of the questions I asked earlier is that they should go and do a comparative analysis in terms of when people go private and when buying to the system, what's the benefit, what's the cost implication, so on. And they agree they're going to do some work on that. So when they come, hopefully, maybe, I don't know, maybe next meeting or depends on when we schedule, we revisit this subject and we have more information to work on, make a decision on, and to make recommendations.
Okay, Esme, then I'll propose a way forward.
But I just the costs to do the improvement work.
Yeah.
So I
We
guess
can suggest.
so I guess I would be reticent to support that only because and I think earlier sort of conscious of the broader impact on the HRA and the fact that that's quite a strong knock on tenants and I it's just it's a rubbish model but it's unfortunately the constraints that we work within. That would be my reticence in that.
Councillor Harper, do you want to come in?
Yeah, basically what Esme said, there wouldn't be a cap for the council in doing work the other properties. So I'm way more interested in like proving that we are really like making sure we're getting our money's worth. I know this one's on.
Yeah. So okay. So I'm gonna draw a line under it there, and I think other than supporting the proposals of the paper that come from the team or Tom and around ensuring that they have sufficient staff resource in terms of the recruitment. And the specific proposal, which I don't really know needs to be a scrutiny recommendation, but yeah, we can follow up if needed around the energy management. It may be one of those things that will happen without us anyway. What I would suggest as a way forward is, given that we have upcoming market regulation, that we sort of keep open the option to revisit this sort of future committee if new information arises, because there will be a response from the council that will have to be worked out based on whatever the regulation ends up being. So what we could do is kind of make sure that we are cited of that in advance, or request that we get a draft before the committee, informed by the discussion that we've had, to ensure that the approach that the council is taking kind of, ensures that the Southwark itself is kind of protected, and also that residents are treated fairly by the steps they're taking. So that's my proposal on that. Is everyone happy with that? Okay, and then we've moved on. I suppose I've sort of smoothly moved us on to the considering the work programme. For the upcoming meeting, which is on the 25th of November, this ties into what we were discussing in the TRAs and TMOs bit. And we had a very fair points from Ian and Chris and others that it was an incomplete discussion because we didn't hear from representatives from TRAs. What we could do on the 25th is interview Councillor King as cabinet member, which we need to do some point during the year regardless, because we also didn't have the political perspective on this strategy. We only heard from officers. So that could form part of the interview with Councillor King, and then we could have representatives from resident bodies, from TRAs and TMOs to, I suppose, in some respects, respond to the stall that was laid out by the officers, and also give us their views on how they would like to see this council support them. Does anyone have thoughts about that? Councillor Hicks.
That sounds sensible. I'd love to hear Chris's views on this, but my sense from the discussion earlier was that the key point in terms of response is around how does the council ensure that it is accountable to TRAs in terms of services that it provides residents, tenants, and therefore it feels like it might be helpful to anchor the discussion at the next Scrutiny Commission around that draft resident engagement strategy, which I think, what officers were saying earlier, is defining what council is proposing as a new model for TRAs and holding the council to account. So I'd be really interested in anchoring the discussion around that, perhaps ensuring that TRAs through Chris, through SGTO, other routes, get sight of that draft strategy. I think it's going out to consultation, so it sounds like it will go that way anyway. But they have sufficient time to review that and then feed that in as representation next time around. I don't know if that works with timeframes, but that in my head feels like it would get to the heart of the issues. But I'd love to.
Just before we bring Chris, I think I think that's definitely a good idea. I guess it depends on exactly as you say, like what the timeline is. But certainly, we can do something slightly separate as scrutiny, like alongside that to get if that consultation is not ready yet or is months in the future, we can certainly get a paper which addresses the direction of travel and gives us information that we can scrutinize around that engagement strategy. I think it's a good idea. Sorry, I want to take Barbara and then Chris. I'm thinking after that.
And it's just a small thing that I would agree with bringing forward the engagement strategy is RA. I just wonder whether it's appropriate then in that case to have a cabinet member for community engagement alongside that rather than and then save housing or the contract management.
Yeah, I would say that would be much more relevant. That's who's accountable in the biggest issue. Engagement structure. But that's it. So we need to. That's got to be ready for discussion. So if that can happen, Bobby.
Let's say that that's our ambition for the meeting, and if you're happy to reach out to okay, but just in terms of the engagement strategy,
just looking at the remits.
Yeah. Just to put aside for a second the question of the remits, in terms of the timeline for the engagement strategy, are you happy to make inquiries about that? Yeah.
Under housing.
Well, it comes under housing, and as far as I can see from the videos, it looks like it's under. So
So I think that's like there's basically that's a sort of concrete question. We just make sure that the right person is invited to the meeting. Yeah.
Clarification regarding. So what do we mean? Two departments. They are fundamentally different. Using the words between different other and should not. And this is exactly how it is raised, and also some other members. So one of the words is community engagement. This department has a directorship and it is under Leisure and Environment Department, not under housing. Then there is another department which is resident involvement. Resident involvement under housing, a completely different remit. Not only that is under housing, but it's in its definition, it has to be 100% fully complying with the housing regulator. Unfortunately, the presentation we received today is flipping between the two. They are mixing, and we have been presented that the strategy of resident involvement, which should be housing scrutiny, is about having barbecues and footballing, which actually is community engagement, which is a completely different directorship. So we need to clarify this fundamental difference between the community engagement and resident involvement, which solely is described by regulators, engagement in the housing matters, which is control over the rents for the tenants, is housing standards, it's cost, it's cleaning, and those kind of.
Right.
But we heard a lot of evidence that we are going to spend more time of singing, dancing, and that. Between we need representatives, as it was meant, from both sides to create clarity and not mix up. Money from HRAs, they are going in a direction which is not necessarily compliant with the housing. I'm not going to say anything. I spent 7 years. I apologize.
Yeah, I think the way that the most organic way to approach it is to work outwards from the TRA, since that was the topic that we had wanted to look at. The resident engagement strategy is referred to is part of housing, clearly, because it was coming from housing officers. And I think that, as you mentioned, it's a very legitimate, an important thing to scrutinize them on exactly, what that engagement involves and whether it's something which should be more appropriately handled by another department or so on. I don't know if it requires people from two departments to sort of hash out the distinctions, but I think it's clear that if we're talking to representatives of housing about a housing strategy, looking at a paper which is from the housing department, we can speak to that paper. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Councillor Hicks, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just looking at the portfolios in the paper that we look at the programme. It all under Councillor King.
Yeah.
I don't see it being in two. So
I think that it definitely is confusing that we have resident involvement, community engagement, which as phrases are not clearly, you could probably swap the names around, and you know what I mean. But I think for the purposes of this, we are dealing with our housing colleagues, and I think that's fine. Basi, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to ask a question, because it's like we've been going round and round with this resident engagement or participation, whatever name we at one point the council did say that they are going to restructure and change the resident participation or engagement strategy. They did that. I don't know what happened to that previous one they did, and then we're back again.
Sorry, I think
so I'm coming. Sorry, I'm going to just land now so that you can.
No,
so,
I think my concern is just that we're going to sort of drift into a conversation about something which wasn't. I understand they're all related, but
yeah, I'm coming back to that. I think my question is: at what point do we get to actually know what resident wants?
So,
at what point? Because I think it would be good to hear directly from the resident.
I think that's very much what we are intending to do. Assuming that the committee is happy to do that, then as I said, I think the focus of this is not working from the frameworks in, but from the TRAs out, as it were, and hear the voice of the residents, and what resources and they need, and then that will help inform discussion about structures and so on. So I think that we sort of reached a point of agreeing what we're going to do. Depending, hopefully, if Councillor King's available, we'll have that interview, and then we will have representatives from the TRAs and the TMOs to talk about what support they need, and that will form part of the interview as well. So I think that's where we are.
Chair, I just wanted to clarify. So if we do invite Councillor King, we're having a focus on TRAs and TMOs, right?
So there'll be we're talking about two items on the agenda. I think that basically, inevitably, if you have a cabinet member interview alongside a piece that is about housing in the same meeting, the cabinet member will want to respond to that.
Right.
So I think if the commissioner has views on the specifics, other than that they would like to be picked up in the interview, maybe email me. That might be the most straightforward, and I can pass that on, and we can kind of form an agenda for that discussion from that, but I think there are some things that will be relatively clear, including the outcome of the regulatory review and things like that.
A very quick question.
Yeah.
Can we be very clear what the date is?
Yeah.
About the message.
The date is the 25th of November.
So
Well, I think if it isn't going to happen, then we need to be clear on that quite early, and that would only be if there was some unavoidable scheduling issue, or if there was some other problem, or if it just seems completely, if we thought it'd be a much more effective meeting based on the timelines for the resident engagement strategy, but the intention is 25th of November, and obviously if that changes, then we'll want to give as much notice as possible. Yeah, of course, yeah. Okay. Yeah, great. All right. Thank you so much for coming to the meeting, and have a good week.